Um, Good evening, everyone. I'll call this August meeting of the Hopewell Borough Council to order. Reggie, you want to do our sunshine statement?
Adequate notice of this meeting has been provided by a notice mailed to the Hopewell Valley News and the Trenton Times, posted on the bulletin board in Borough Hall, and filed with the Borough Clerk as required by law.
You know, join in the flag salute. With allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, liberty, and justice for all.
Mayor Kennedy?
Here.
Ms. Hook? Here. Mr. Mackey?
Here.
Ms. McCullough?
Here.
Ms. Steeler? Here. Ms. Weaver?
Here.
Ms. Williams?
Here.
We've got two reports that we received in our packets from Public Works and Water Sewer. Is there any questions? Accept those.
I have a question. Can I make a quick comment?
Certainly.
It's more of a public comment that our water department is one guy and our clerk is one woman. And so if you have a problem with your water bill, they're happy to fix it, but just be nice and have some patience. Thank you.
Make sure. Next, item 5 for announcements. We have two very positive ones, and I'm happy to turn things over to Council President Weaver for the first one, labeled grant information.
Thank you, Mayor Kennedy. I am thrilled to announce that Hopewell Borough has been awarded a Safe Routes to School grant in the amount of 1.5. Number is so big, it's still a huge number, don't worry. $1.51 million. This is the largest amount of money awarded in this to a single municipality in this grant cycle, and it will allow us to implement many of the priorities those of us concerned about traffic safety and Hopewell have identified over the last few years. The grant will fund 100% of the covered projects, preserving our tax dollars for other needs. I'd like to thank the Greater Mercer Transportation Management Association, especially Executive Director Cheryl Castronakis and former Safe Routes to School Coordinator Lisa Seriazal, who is currently the senior planner for the transportation. I don't know why I can't talk today. I'm too excited.
You're so excited.
I am. For transportation for the city of Trenton. They offered an immeasurable amount of support and guidance throughout the process. I'd also like to thank our team here in Hopewell. That includes Nancy Jaminow, who was our former acting administrator, who lent her expertise and experience to the grant application process. The borough clerk, Reggie Toth, who stepped in to attend grant meetings when we were without a full-time administrator. I'd also like to thank the Hopewell Borough Pedestrian and Bicycle Safety Advisory Committee, Mel Bourne, Ann Heaton, Brad Evans, Mark Bovenizer, Ian Levine, Shelby Toole, and Lou Young. They provided the county roads report, inventories of crosswalks and sidewalks, and collected letters of support from the community. In addition, I'd like to thank the rest of the Hopewell Borough Council members who voted to support the application: Mayor Kennedy, Councilman Mackey, Councilwoman McCullough, Council President Morehouse, Councilwoman Steeler, and Mayor Anzano. Thanks to the Mercer County DOT, the Hopewell Township Committee, the Hopewell Valley School Board, particularly Mark Peters, Dr. Scott Patel, principal of Hopewell Elementary School, and the DNR Greenway for supporting this grant application, as well as all the residents of Hopewell Borough and Hopewell Township who wrote letters of support. Just for a little bit of background, the application was based on suggestions from the Greater Mercer TMA school travel plan that they supplied us after we did a walking audit of Hopewell Elementary. And then it was supplemented with information from the PD Sacs County Roads Report. I had never written a grant before this. And I started working on it during a very odd time for the borough because we were without any administrator. So it was very serendipitous that Nancy soon came along and joined us as an interim administrator. Because not only was she an engineer, but she had experience writing this very grant. She was an asset in meetings with traffic engineers and planners, and it was actually during this meeting with the DOT to discuss this grant that we first brought up the conversation about lowering the speed limit on Broad Street and making Broad and Greenwood no turn on red. Because of this unusual situation, it was key to have assistance from others in making connections and setting up meetings. Mayor Kennedy encouraged the application from the beginning and helped attain letters of support. And I had to call on resources like the Greater Mercer TMA more than I might have if we were not in such a position. But some of the projects covered in the grant include new sidewalks where they're missing throughout the borough, and sidewalk extensions that will allow pedestrian safe passage to St. Michael's Farm Preserve and Kings Path. It also includes rectangular rapidly flashing beacons, RFBs, like you see at the library, when you push the button, the flashing light goes off, at pretty much every major intersection on Broad Street and some on Princeton as well. Also some overhead lights for the school and upgrading some crosswalks to be high vis, continental ladder style, etc. And that is about it. So, yay.
Chris, one of us from up here has to at least thank you for your efforts here. You've been spearheading this project for pedestrian bicycle safety since prior to being on council. The startup of the PBSAC, and before that, when it was an ad hoc group working on behalf of the borough. So on behalf of all of us, and I hope to say everyone in our community, thank you for spearheading this. $1.5 million will put us on the safety map. And we could not be more delighted in what we can do with this money going forward in the next couple of years to make our town a safer place and a better place to travel for pedestrians and bicyclists. So thank you. Next announcement is much more mundane, but also positive. Those who've been following this since 2009, Hopewell Borough has been kind of ensnared in litigation with Verizon, the phone company, over the payment of property taxes for the value of the wires, essentially, that bring or used to bring telephone service to your homes and businesses. This past week, the Supreme Court of New Jersey affirmed our victory in the case, essentially saying that we were correct to collect taxes for them, from them, and I'm very appreciative of our attorney, Joe Tortorella, for spearheading this. Our prior administrator, Michelle Hoban, for her advocacy on this, and former Mayor Paul Anzano over the years put a lot of effort into this fight. So happily, with this decision, there will be no negative impact to our taxpayers from the case. There's still some to go. The way the tax court works is that they only do 1 year at a time. So while this set the stage for what the process would be, technically is only 1 year. So we very much look forward to the entire case being quickly resolved, but excited that we do not have to allow them to claw back the taxes they paid from that year.
So
So
Ryan, which year was that?
2009.
So in effect, if the courts agree, this would then extend from 2009 to the present?
So from a methodology perspective, yes. The question that this particular tax raises is that at the time of utility deregulation, there was always this tax that the phone company, Ma Bell, paid to each town. As phones got deregulated and you had what are called competitive local exchange carriers, so there was competing phone companies. It seemed to make sense, I guess, to the legislature at the time to only make the one that used 51% of the wires pay that tax. And at some point, with competition or the lack of phone use, I suppose, Verizon stopped or claimed to stop providing 51% of the phone services. The process for determining that has been set. We were correct in agreeing and thinking that they provided it for that year. And so for these years, there actually is a question about, you know, at what point between then and now, likely they stopped being 51%. I don't want to get into details about what our attorney thinks about that. It is not negative. But ultimately, this set the standard, confirmed that what we did in that year was correct. And I'll just say that perhaps it would be quite bad if we were wrong and we had to pay all of these tax years back. Would be, you know, they paid about between $30,000 and $50,000 a year in taxes over this period.
Thank you.
Next up on the discussion, as a thank you, I suppose, to everyone who was here Tuesday night for our special subcommittee meeting on the water system. We don't have really any new information for tonight, but just a couple of reminders. One, for those who weren't at the meeting, The video recording is up on our town's YouTube page. You go to the website, click on the top right, or go to the water page, Hopewell Borough-nj.us/water. Bring you all the information on our water system, including a link to both the slides that Councilman Mackey presented during the meeting, as well as a link to watch the meeting on YouTube. We said then we'll continue to devote a portion of each of our meetings to any updates that we've got on the process or new information we have about water. Generally, I suspect Councilman Mackey will have some update on a different element of water, perhaps for his liaison report or several more. But I believe as far as the potential sale goes, between Tuesday and today, there's not much new to report. And I encourage everyone who has comments or questions to first, visit the website. The materials there, including videos, are hopefully helpful. And we are available for questions as well. Reminder that yesterday, for example, it was one of the every other Wednesdays where our administrator and I are here at 1 o'clock for kind of open drop-in. That also goes for one Saturday a month. This month it will be the 17th. Information is still going to be all on the website, but other opportunities to ask questions and interact formally and informally. Again, I believe the commitment from us as we go forward is to continue to have meetings like that, both formal and informal ones, as we go forward as opportunities to get more information out to the community. And again, ideas for how to help us get information or take comments is also part of the bag that we're looking for as well. We get emails about it, but different types of ways of addressing those meetings, we're open to that. This last meeting was a little different. We thought went pretty well, but feedback on what elements of the meeting might have made it better or could make it better, we'd like to hear that too. We did, it was not a packed enough house to use it, but we did test successfully a overflow seating area upstairs with a monitor. So as we continue to do things that bring out a lot of public comment and interaction, which we really encourage, and things like that last meeting, we felt when we continue to go out of our way to invite people and send everyone mailings and get information out about when we think things that are important are happening. And as we go forward, we'll have some new options for overflow seating if needed. Dave, Chris, anyone else have any other updates beyond that before?
No, thank you.
All right, next thing we have as a discussion item. The past couple of years, we've talked about our outdoor dining program, what happens when it sunsets. I've asked our attorney and planner to give us a little bit of information about where we are and what that is. So we can talk about amongst us a bit, maybe giving her and our planner a little bit of direction about moving forward with it. And then hopefully, if that goes favorably, to have an ordinance for us to look at a future meeting. So Lisa, any quick overview you want to give?
Yeah, so the state law that grants essentially a waiver type temporary approval for outdoor dining expires in November. We don't think that it's going to be extended. So what that means is that by default, the ordinances that were in place prior to that law would essentially go back into effect. And this, the question was raised, is that still the right policy? Because it hasn't really been the only policy in place since the COVID law. So we've been looking at the standards and trying to figure out the options. And one of the questions is, keep the same standard, which is a minor site plan waiver approval, maybe keep that procedure, amend the costs and the escrow. Another option is potentially going to a permit system where you take it out of land use and make it an administrative approval. So there's some options involved, but I think the Joanna Slagle and I at this point recommend maybe staying with the same basic policy that's in place, but looking to ways that you can alleviate some of the burden on applicants. And there are ways of doing that in a very fair way that apply even-handedly to all, to anyone who's making an application for a minor site plan approval. So that's sort of where we are, and so we think we have some ideas to, and then specifically maybe to bring them to council. I don't know how specific you want me to
Yeah,
get.
I think that's fair. I mean,
Okay.
what's on the books now, so right now we have a temporary program that's going to end that does not require planning board approval. And I think the thinking was that ultimately, users of outdoor, users, we're diners and users, restaurants that have the expanded outdoor dining or the special outdoor dining should ultimately come to the planning board, but maybe recognize that for something that might have been tested for 4 years, that the escrows or the paperwork might be adjusted perhaps to something that makes sense for the type of request that they're making. Is that, I think the two options are continue with an administrative program and extend that, indefinitely, I suppose, or into the future, or create a process for, more traditional site plan approval, but maybe one that recognizes that it maybe shouldn't cost $5,000 to get an approval for something you've been doing for 4 years.
But that also appreciates the land use concerns.
Yeah,
and-
so
and
under that scenario, there would still be an application, they go to the planning board, it would, they'd be noticed, I guess, to neighbors and things like that.
Time frame wise, if this expires in November and we need to put in a new ordinance, and then the merchants, the restaurants need to then put in their application, it actually sounds like there's not a lot of time there.
Well, there's
Is
there
it?
is not a lot of time.
Okay,
So
okay, so-
if we were to have an ordinance for our September meeting,
Mm-hmm.
that could be done by October or the end of it currently expires at the end of November. So we could have the process in place. And if there were to be for example, I would recommend a brief
First
extension.
reading and second read, but we do
Correct.
need to read.
Yeah, the ordinances need first and second reading, and also would go to the planning board in between. So that would be enough time to do that, and
And we meet before the planning board next month, yeah.
it varies.
That's
I don't
why-
think
yeah,
we
that's
do-
why-
maybe after, to be honest with you.
We'll double check, because it's usually the Wednesday before the meeting, but I have to.
Correct, so there's not a planning board meeting, I don't believe, between us, so again, it would be, on this scenario, it would be a September. First reading, likely an October planning board consistency review, and then a November. Vote here on something that could, what I would suggest, and I'm suggesting to our professionals, extend our current system for some brief period of time so that
Oh,
their
so that they
applications
then
can be.
have time, yeah,
Yes.
that's what I was, that's what I was, and,
And correct me if I'm wrong, but my recollection is, it's been a while, we actually instituted our system locally before
We did.
the state actually issued an executive order mandating it. We thought it was coming, but I remember Michelle Hogan said, here we are, what can we do in the very short term to give the restaurants some flexibility? Because remember, there was a time when nobody was dining indoors, so you had to really do something urgently to have, for them to even open. And I don't remember exact timing of it, but, so if my recollection is correct, always, we actually had a policy in place before the state mandate arrived. So does that mean that if the state mandate expires, our policy is still, I'm just saying in the short term, is it at our discretion whether we continue the existing policy or not, or does it rely entirely on?
Well, at this point in time, I think when the state policy expires, I think it's over. Because, and the reason I say that is because then you're left with a land use ordinance in place. And it's very hard for you to, for the long term, say, we're not going to comply with our land use ordinance, and we're not going to have any standards or that. Right, so that's.
No, I was thinking in the very short, in other words, if we're talking about a few weeks,
But I agree, yeah, and I mean, most restaurants that don't have site plan approval should by now know that there is this potential. So at least, at least if the policy is generally the same, it's not going to come as a surprise.
Right.
If anything, the policy would, and the basic design standards would remain similar or at least, you know, if nothing else, they wouldn't be as stringent, but maybe the cost would go down, so it would be.
Maybe I'll interpret David's question a little differently.
Okay.
If we did nothing, that everything with any outdoor dining that doesn't have site plan approval would need to end at the end of November.
Correct, they would have to get
Right.
site plan, yes, sorry.
We do, but one that requires,
We,
that's not an administrative program.
no, the waiver program that was put in place was, I thought it was in response to the executive order.
Well, the executive order that kept the people from eating inside. Yes.
Right, so and then that's why there was a resolution adopted, and then.
Well, let me put it a different way. If David's point was, if we do nothing, does our current administrative program just continue?
No,
And I think it probably does not, and we should take some action.
Right, no, I mean, I'm not suggesting
Yeah.
you don't, but
Right.
I also think it's important to point out that, you know, the action that we take may not be, I mean, we may not allow everything that was allowed under the temporary
Right.
ordinance, because there were circumstances there that no longer exist. So that was one of the questions, was to look at this and say, you know, I think it's fair to say we see this with a degree of flexibility that we didn't before COVID, before all this happened, right? And we've also been able to live with it for a while and see how some of these changes work in practice, which is a great thing too. So at least in my mind, where we're gonna end up is somewhere it's not an exact match to the policy that we had, but it's taking all the elements of it that work and having a fair and objective process, you know, site by site, right?
right,
But you know, we might say, you know, you probably can't use those 6 parking spots for tables anymore, or maybe, you know, just saying, you know, in other words, there's all these things that have to be hammered out, so that's the
correct.
challenge,
because
right?
you still have your own land use.
Right,
Core bulk requirements that you have, and the design standards that you have to comply with. So I mean, you could amend the design standard for outdoor dining.
Right.
But then your core zoning ordinance, because the idea was that the state law wasn't, it sort of just ignored the land use considerations. It allowed you to sort of, you know, it was an exception to your own land use provisions.
So, I'm sorry that the state didn't, you know, take this off our plate as something we need to do, but because we have plenty of things on our docket at the moment, but, and any other kind of input that anyone would like to give Lisa as she kind of looks at this?
I'm sorry.
I mean, just that I, you know, I hope that we can make this as straightforward as possible for the businesses. I think all of us up here enjoyed the outdoor dining quite a bit, and so, you know, if I hope that we are able to maintain it. That's, you know, and. Yeah,
Here,
So I'll continue working with Joanna and, you know, we'll come up with, something
Excellent.
that
right, so,
acknowledges what you have in place, but also helps alleviate some of the burden
right, so
on the
I'm saying
restaurants.
best case timing scenario, that would be something to introduce in September. That would likely have a public hearing at a date, you know, October or November, more likely November, but you have to be determined.
and just as a worst case scenario, if there were any hiccups in getting the ordinance through, we are in agreement that we could do something for a few months to not create havoc. That's.
Well, I mean, we would have to take some actual action, and I think what I'm hearing and what I think we're instructing our attorneys is to make sure that
Yeah.
We're prepared to do that. If
Yeah,
it would need
yeah.
to be a.
And it will be the dead of winter
It will
at that
also
point,
be
so
November.
it will be November, so there is that.
That's really
Our current, even
Yes.
under our
Yes.
program, there's no
Yeah.
outdoor dining
No, there's no.
between.
That's what
between-
we actually.
Let's all just talk one thing, but there's no dining between the end of November and. March.
Okay.
So with that, I'll open up the floor to the public for comments. For those of you online, and we've got 8 people watching in from home or their places of business. If you push your raise hand sign, we'll recognize you, or those here in person. I'll invite you to come up to the front. And one of the things we've learned in the last couple of meetings is that I feel that rather than standing dead center, kind of at the side where we used to have the buckle for the red, kind of as a place where people here in person and at the Zoom camera can see and hear. So with that, anyone like to speak on any topic tonight? Please come on forward.
As some of you may recall, I had asked for a hearing on the outdoor dining, but it turned into a real big thing. And I didn't want my fellow citizens to have to pay for a lawyer for the hearing, so I dropped it. But it's always been my position, that was not done right when we did it. We did not follow the exact law. And one of my big concerns about it is, obviously, given what the governor signed, there was not notice to the neighboring properties. And people who live next to those restaurants, well, I know we all want to help the restaurants, have suffered somewhat because of it. I mean, the restaurant that, you know, and it's helped a little because somebody built a fence, but there were wild parties out there. There were people crashing bottles. You know, over by Chubby's, people can't get into their homes sometimes. So I hope there will be, when there is a public hearing, I know you want to help the restaurants, but you have to give consideration to the neighbors that are around these restaurants, because, you know, it just was done without very much consideration for the neighbors at all. So that's all I wanted to say on that.
Thank you. I believe one of the two kind of options, and I think the one that might make the most sense is ultimately having each one approved by the planning board, but having a process still be noticed, still be a hearing, but recognizing that maybe they don't have to put a $5,000 escrow and have a.
I don't care about the escrow.
So,
Thank you.
see, I see you, Paul, and I was joking, gonna say, seeing no one else, I'll close the meeting, but anyone, imagine there's other people like to speak. Yep, you can come up closer so we can see and hear you.
Okay, do we have any additional updates on the additional funding for the train station renovations?
We have not heard about the second grant yet.
Okay, thank you. And
Oh, actually, let me add to that, just, you know, again, for everyone maybe not as familiar with that, there is pending. We initially got, for a project we expected to be about $500,000, a grant covering half of it. A project ended up being much more expensive. The State Historic Trust was very cooperative in helping us find grants for the additional costs, and has already amended the first grant paperwork to allow for that, which makes us think that they're gonna look favorably on the grant application to them that they asked us to submit. I'll also note that Senator Cory Booker has advanced funding for the project to the federal, gosh, it's a Ways and Means Committee, what the Appropriations Committee that he has access to for funding for the project as well. It got through the first round, but has, you know, nobody is at a point of getting any other further news on that yet.
okay, thank you, Mayor. I mean, it's coming along nicely, just wandering around with dollars. And then earlier this year, our governor signed new legislation about the New Jersey affordable housing. I was wondering if and when the council will be prepared to let the voters and constituents know what that impact is to our town.
Now, we don't have our planner here tonight, but I work in this field, and in the October timeframe is when we're going to get our figures. So we've been working with our planner and attorneys and being prepared for what to do when that happens. It's a new process, you know, before some of our times, but not all of our times, we were involved in the prior round, which involved litigation with the state. Ultimately, the town decided that it was way too expensive for what it was worth, and we kind of bowed out. The new system is not hopefully as expensive, but still pretty onerous, so we're kind of waiting to see both what they think our obligation is and how challenging the process will be for us to kind of slog through. But in the interim, we continue to, I think, put our, let's say, money where our mouth is when it comes to trying to find places for affordable housing in the borough, whether it's inclusionary developments or small projects like the Runyon one that's going to open up, be finished soon, that has a unit. So
And the
Hopewell Inn, yeah, thank you.
Yeah, so that's all.
Though even though technically they're not really part of the approved plan, every time we have an application before us, I feel we try to grab a unit and put it into our redevelopment thinking as well.
Do you know how many affordable housing units we have in the borough right now?
I do. Doug, I mean, well, we can look into what the actual number is, but
We need to update that because there are some that were established years ago, but they had a defined time period for the deed restrictions. And there are other ones that are longer, but the same question came in my mind. We need to see where exactly we are. Not enough.
Well, yeah,
Answer, yeah.
I'm sure there's never enough. Now I'd like to read a statement signed by nearly 150 Hopewell Borough stakeholders. It says, we the undersigned hereby respectfully request the Hopewell Borough Planning Board formulate and the Hopewell Borough Council adopt an ordinance to amend ordinance number 887, which was adopted by the Hopewell Borough Council on July 1st, 2024. The ordinance was adopted without sufficient time for study and consideration or taking into account some legitimate concerns of the borough residents, which were not adequately answered. Some of these concerns include, but are not limited to, the following. The number of units which may overtax the borough's resources and are too many for a small neighborhood involved. This topic would involve addressing the potential number of new students in the school system, along with evaluating the ability of our emergency services to be able to serve this complex and the people living there. The aesthetics of three-story buildings in a residential area of single-family homes and townhomes, developments of multi-unit townhomes and apartments in Hopewell Township are all placed in areas that are not established residential neighborhoods. The impact of such a large development on traffic as Hopewell's roads are overtaxed was not intended for the volume of the development this will create. Residents would like to know exactly where the parking spots will be for all of the units. The failure of the council to consider and evaluate the comments made by many concerned residents. We would like a special meeting of council to address and answer all of the specific issues in a public forum. And at the above recommended meeting, we'd like council to address the history of flooding on Lafayette Street and how this development will affect what we are told is already a high water table. We have no objection to placing affordable housing units in this town. In fact, we would welcome them. We do object to having over 130 units built on such a small lot. We would also like the borough to set design standards specific to this area and not just leave it up to the developer's imagination. It is essential to have community input regarding these specifics. And please take the necessary actions to amend the ordinance as quickly as possible. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I guess I'll acknowledge and thank you for that, and also just say, while there's no discussion back and forth, but since that is for the record, one of my colleagues at the law firm that I work is involved with the project, so I recused myself from that project. There's not really a discussion here on it, so I didn't get up and during the middle of your, but I just wanted to say that during.
Great, thank you, appreciate that.
Clerk,
Thank you.
thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening. Paul Peter, Hopewell Borough, 27 years. One comment, that ordinance is the easiest ordinance, I'm sorry, that petition was the easiest petition I've ever signed. And its reason why is because people say, are you for it or against it? I said, neither. We're for changing the ordinances, the rules, the guidelines. That's what it's about. So I actually invite all of you to sign it as well. And I know, I guess one of you even said perhaps more time should have occurred after that July 1st meeting, and it should have been deferred a month. So I want to address three points. One is legal, and one involves my relationship with the developer. And well, I want to say one is legal. There's two parts to that. So here it is. So first, the actual ordinance, which is 12-24 MF multifamily housing residential zone. I see two issues, and it's a matter of legal language. Let me explain. I'm an architect. I deal with ordinances all the time. I was on planning board for 10 years. You might know my project, the bike shop in town. I've asked for variances. I love this town. I love working with everybody. So having said that, on this, in this ordinance, says people bulk and area requirements. And Joanna has explained these things, many times here. It says minimum lot area, 4 acres. We already have a problem. One lot is about a little over 3 acres, and one lot is a little over 1 acre. So it doesn't say lot areas, and you may think I'm fine pivot, but I know in law that words matter, detailed words matter. So it's just poorly written. I've shown this to colleagues of mine. You just said, what do you think that means? If there are two lots, one across the street from the other, are they separate or is house it together? You don't know. There's no language in here that tells you combine them. So think about your own house. You got a property across the street, you have your own house. You couldn't say, oh, both lots are together and I get to do my calculation. So that's one problem. Second problem is E, maximum density, 30 units per acre. The developer thinks he's getting about 125, 130, because he's adding 3 plus 1. It's a math problem. But once again, bulk and area requirements are per lot. So in essence, you can only get 90 units because it's based on 3 acres. You can't combine them. So that's one problem. The second problem is the notice. The notice, there was a typo on the notice. It talked about the 2 meetings, you mentioned it earlier about, and I never knew this before, then you have, there's 2 readings of any ordinance that happens. And they can't happen on the same night. They have to happen one night where it's just presented. And I've been here for both of those. And then there's no comments given to the council so they can read it and digest it, have a month to think about it, and come back and have the public hearing, which happened, right? So the problem is, it said here that the first notice happened on, first reading happened on July 1st, and the second notice happened on July 1st. So someone reading this would be confused, and they would say, well, so maybe tonight was supposed to be the second reading, or it's just confusing. If you didn't know what was happening in June and you got this for the July meeting, you could be confused. So now we'll move on to the second legal, I'm sorry, then the second part of that was postcard. What happened when I said the word postcard, David Mackey talked about the importance of the water meeting. And those postcards alerted people. We had a great turnout. David did an excellent presentation for anybody that missed it on the water, and it was an excellent meeting. And on the June 6th meeting, on the videotape, go to the 42nd minute. And David talks about it because that was so important to notify the town. And even asked how were people notified, not just by word of mouth or website, but these postcards really got people to attend and be civically engaged. So he said, and I quote, he said, we need to notify everybody in the borough by land, air, and sea. We want to make sure everyone has a say or interest, that knows about this, has an opportunity to speak in that meeting. And he said, so let's do the same thing. As far as I know, no one received a postcard during that meeting. You didn't have to, but by legal sense, I got my notice because I'm 200 feet within the property. So I think because it was stated in a council meeting as an intent and there wasn't followed through, I think that's a legal problem. I'm not an attorney, I'm an architect, but I'm around a lot. I have a lot of good real estate land use attorney friends, and I've mentioned this sort of thing. So those are the legal issues, and I submit them as exhibits 1, 2, 3, and 4 to Lisa. The last thing I want to say is my relationship with the developer. I found Jeffrey Albert to be just a wonderful presenter and a caring developer at that planning board meeting. He showed slides of what he had intended. I said, this is not your typical developer. One comes out of state, just doesn't care. This is a really interesting person. On a whim, I called him the next day on July 2nd. And he's not gonna take my call. This crazy architect is across the street. Not only did he take my call, we went on for 20 minutes talking about the whole project. And the more I talked to him, he really has done his homework on this site. He knows this town. Turns out he lives in Princeton, it's local. So I was really, really impressed. We've had a dialogue over the month. Phones, texting, he calls me, so, and it's never an annoying thing. It's just a very nice relationship. Now, here's the part that gets interesting. What I talked about on July 1st meeting about the idea of step massing and making it fit better in the quilt of Hopewell. Lower buildings, residential streets, higher at Somerset, higher next to the big trees with the stream. He said, that was my first scheme. I said, first scheme for who? What? He said, for the redevelopment subcommittee. A lot of people are under the impression that the whole planning board meets with a developer or does that. That's not the case. And it's totally legal. Basically, 3 members become a subcommittee, just like you have on a water committee. And they meet with the developer for over, sometimes it could be a year and a half, to fine tune the project. And that's what happened. But it was fine tuned in a way that some of the details, he was told, for example, he couldn't build over 3.5 stories. He wanted 4. He wanted to do 2.5 and 4 to get to his number. But he was told no, and the ordinance says no. And the problem is, the only way for him to do the right thing and step it properly, and I know some people might be like, how can you have 4 stories? That would be like an industrial building in Somerset, way back by the trees. But the part that we all pass going through the town with the residences would be lower. So he has to ask for a variance. And I said, listen, Hopewell is such a friendly town. I've asked for a variance in my own house. It's not a problem. We want you to be successful. But he doesn't want to spend all that money to ask for a variance. And the planning zoning board, actually, which is part of the planning board, can say no. And I've encouraged him. So that's a dilemma. So what's happened here, everybody did the right thing. Planning board voted for a redevelopment plan to better Hopewell, help with our retail, struggling retail, help with energizing the town, all that. But what wasn't studied enough were the minor details, the height, the setback, the density, traffic studies, maybe increasing a bus line in order to get, it's a multifaceted problem, like David is presenting with the water. It's a big deal to get it right. So to paraphrase Simon and Garfunkel, are you ready? This is the first. Slow down, you move too fast. Feeling Hopewell.
I'll just offer if there's gonna be any comment or back and forth from council, I've been offered to step down at this point on this subject. It seems like there's not, but I just want to be extra cautious and not be in the middle of an engaged discussion. So, yeah, Paul, thank you.
Oh, do you want to go? Go ahead.
Sure.
I want to be very like.
I'd like to sort of echo what Paul said, and I came, we had not communicated on this, but I thought. Brian,
Just your name.
Tom Ennis in Hopewell Borough. I thought, Ryan, the argument that you gave for having a very open and slow deliberative process for the water discussion was the right argument to be making. And it seems sort of weird to me that this even, I think, more consequential issue of the development was sort of rushed through, is the feeling. And I think a lot of people that I've talked to don't feel that we got the kind of information we need to think about it properly. And I thought, and I don't know if there are any backseas in this universe, but I really think that the council owes it to the town to figure out a way to talk about this in a way so that people can really understand what's at stake and what the options are. Because I think, it was just a really unfortunate, the timing of here's this thing, a month later, here's an argument. And I was very impressed by the quality of the discussion. People, came and with thoughtful comments about it on both sides, but there wasn't time for anybody to digest those comments or to ask follow-up questions to get answers. So I just think it was a real sort of failure of the process that got us to the end of that meeting last month. And so I hope we could do something to sort of rectify that. Thank you.
I'll speak again. I'm still rolling. Following up on what was said by my neighbors. I know we talked about the moral obligation to provide affordable housing. I think everybody that commented on it said, yeah, well, we should be, and the state requires us to provide affordable housing. One thing I don't think everybody knows is that entire area is surrounded by senior citizens. And if you go up Lafayette Street, you will see one senior is already selling their house. A couple, spoke here last time, they had concerns. People next to them are talking about selling their houses. So, I mean, people have lived here 20 and 30 years. What obligation do we have to them? it's my understanding, and I could be wrong, Mary will probably know this is a legal question better than I do, because I didn't do a lot of land use, I did other things. It's my understanding that if we don't either have a moratorium on the application coming in or amend the ordinance, that once this builder puts in his application, we can't change the ordinance. Is that correct?
I find it would be inappropriate for me to answer a legal question on this
Okay.
topic.
Okay.
However, I will, I'm sure get kicked by saying this by an army of ethics police. But as a redevelopment attorney, there is a step in between involving a redevelopment agreement.
Okay,
And that, if I were to be asked a question generally
okay.
about a different redevelopment project, I would probably tell someone that a site plan could not be brought yet until a redevelopment agreement, until someone's designated as a redeveloper. And a redevelopment agreement was.
Okay,
signed.
so that's a little better, but, so what I think everyone is saying is, we would like to have a conversation with everybody about some of our concerns. One of the big concerns is flooding, and DEP has gotten much, much stricter on stormwater runoff. There's gonna have to be a gigantic detention basin there. I would bet money on it. And I don't see where you're gonna put that. If you look at the one that's on Elm Street, it's gigantic. I would think this one would have to be as big. You also have a stream there, and you're gonna, only DEP can issue the stream encroachment permit. So that's why, and not even talking about, you know, the underground pollution that's there. So I think we really need, as we go through this, to have DEP come and talk to us about what is gonna be required on this site. I brought it up last time. I know other people, we do have terrible flooding there. People have, I have 3 sub pumps. I know my neighbors have 3 sub pumps. They run all the time, you know, so, and still we flood. So, you know, there's gonna have to be something really done to that site to deal with the flooding. And the other thing, and this, Mayor, you can come back into, because it's general questions, and I'm not reporting you to any ethics people. You know, I have read the new Affordable Housing Act. And there are things in there that I think we would like to talk about, you know, and I think Krista had talked about, you know, accessory dwelling units. And if we put that, I'm sure there's people in the town that have a basement, you know, that maybe, and I've read the requirements for it, or a garage they'd like to, and it's my understanding, I think Princeton actually got a grant for it, that they could, you might have to change the zoning, but, you know, they could make some extra money. Also, one of the things in there, which I think is wonderful, is that 50% of it can go to veterans. And I think it would be a wonderful thing. We don't devote that many resources to veterans in Hopewell, although we have a lot of them. If we could have 50% of the affordable housing be allocated to veterans. So I won't go on, but I'd like to have a meeting where we talk about, and you could join in that one, because it could be a general conversation there, where we talk about what do we want to do about affordable housing before the state just says, come on, you have a deadline, and this is how many you have to do. So, you know, as we go through this, not just this on this project, but, you know, could we talk about all that generally? Those are my comments. Thank you.
Thank you. And I will take the opportunity to talk, to mention the accessory dwelling units, because I'm 1000% with you there. Unfortunately, at least from my understanding of the new code rules, is that most accessory dwelling units that one might, like a Princeton style one, so actually on Tuesday, what day is today, Thursday? I don't know. I spoke to the Princeton Bar Association about accessory dwelling units. We do technically have an ordinance on our books that allows them. Unfortunately, they have to be currently, if you were to have one at your house, you want to have one, you could have one tomorrow, if you agreed to a 30-year deed restriction, making it affordable housing. Most people tend not to want to do that. So I would very much love to have what you're describing, and we've talked about a bit, and hopefully we can advance, but an ordinance that would allow that for people here.
But for seniors, if you're saying 30 years, What do you care?
Well, yeah, yes, that's.
I'm really thinking of this as like.
I mean, you're a senior 50, right? So.
55, I'm unbelievable.
I'm not gonna say how old I am, but I don't expect to live out that deed restriction. To be honest.
I mean, so, but I was looking at the figures, and they can be fairly high. I mean, for a single person, I think it was $72,000, so.
It
It
is.
wouldn't be a
No,
bad thing.
it's, thank you. I personally think it's a wonderful idea. We have talked with our planner about it. We, have, let's say bandwidth issues, but there's a lot of things we want to get to. That one was kind of on the top of my list, to be honest with you.
Okay,
And
okay.
that we haven't got to, it tells you, I think, what you need to know about how many other important things we have to do, but I am.
It's just that I'm
100%
concerned about
with
the
you.
pressures
Yeah.
from the state and,
No, and for those of you who actually ever have a chance to talk to anyone policy wise from the state, and join us in saying that we should get credit for those units. And for the most part, traditional accessory dwelling units, if you wanted to rent to a teacher or something like that, that didn't actually qualify for affordable
Yeah.
housing or go through the program, it doesn't count for us in the
Yeah.
plan, which is a shame.
Well, they're gonna have a dispute resolution process, is my understanding, so, I mean, isn't that something that could be raised there?
Potentially, yeah, no, thank you.
Thank you.
Hi.
Jennifer Curtis, 73 on West Broad. My question is there a list somewhere that we have that shows our rental properties that are affordable? Or are any other units so that we're counting things? There might be things in this borough that could be counted that are affordable. That we are not counting. Have we ever done that? So that, and then we know, what our obligation would be, and I've lived here 16 years, I guess. I come from West Windsor, so I was very familiar with the lawsuit of thinking you're not gonna do affordable housing and the money that West Windsor spent and lost. So it's real, so you do wanna comply, but I would imagine that we have gems here that are not being counted. That are already affordable units, does anyone know?
But I.
Yeah, go for it.
No, we've talked about this a lot so two things, and Ryan has greater expertise on this, but I just wanted to blurt a couple things out. One, I've always thought it would be really important to have an inventory of all the multifamily units that we have. It would be really nice to know what the rents are too. I mean, I'm not sure how easy it is to get that information, but, and some of that information is available from taxing, but my understanding is that it's imperfect. But the fact that something might be rented at a level that is commensurate with, let's say, lower moderate income, doesn't mean that it's counted as an affordable unit, because if it doesn't have a deed restriction on it, they don't give you credit for it. Now, would there be opportunities potentially to create something like that? We actually had something like that in the past, and I think the program still exists. There's a small cities grant where you could provide a low interest loan to a landlord as an incentive to rehabilitate a substandard apartment without displacing the person living in it. And in exchange for that low interest loan, which would then go back into kind of a revolving fund when it's paid off and stop it from enrollment anyways, then there would be, I think, a 10-year deed restriction. So temporary, and then it expires. But if you think about the number of multifamily dwellings that we have in town, it does, in a way, it doesn't make sense from a practical standpoint that you have places that may actually be affordable, but they're not treated as affordable units, they're not administratively considered to be affordable units, and of course, there are obligations to affirmatively market affordable units to find people, but it's one of the challenges, and I don't know, Ryan, is there anything in the new rules that addresses this or provides opportunities for perhaps retroactively creating affordable units from existing stock?
There is, but they still do require the deed notices, so that, there could be programs of kind of buying back the restriction, with extra, some towns use,
Feels
money
like
from
about rental
affordable.
rights to me. I mean, I think it's creative and I think it's something that should be considered. When I think of the people that own multi-units in this town, they're pretty cooperative, educated people. I think they would probably tell you what their rents are. So I think if we look at it from a way, they would tell you, and if it helped the town, be a healthy ecosystem. I think it's something that, you know, I think it's something to look at. That doesn't mean we don't want, affordable units, but it means that we're kind of not looking at some of the resources that are probably already here.
Yeah, if there's a way to fund it, and it's the thing with the deed
Yeah.
restrictions, they don't come for free.
Yes.
I mean, usually when we get that, let's say somebody applies for a variance for something, and there's an opportunity to say, well, look, in exchange for the variance, you know, the public good that comes from deed restricting one of these apartments justifies giving you a variance on some other issue. I mean, that's the way.
Yeah.
So the planning board's always looking for those opportunities. But if you don't have an application coming in, I mean, I don't suppose there's any reason why you couldn't try to work with something, but we do have to have a funding source to do it. But again, I mean, what you're touching on is something we thought about a lot, and it's a small town, we have to look at every resource that we have to do this, because it's literally one unit here, one unit there, except, you know, some of the things that potentially may happen in the future, and it's such a challenge. I mean, we're
And for all
committed
we
to it.
know, like the beautiful Runyon property that's being restored, that's so exquisite.
Mhm.
Who knows, that there might be more opportunity there, that if you have a conversation with the investors who have so graciously are restoring it, they might be open to something.
Well,
That's a good example.
They created it for me,
They
Yes.
have one.
actually at another location.
Yeah.
So they did it with the property that they already owned,
Mhm.
rather than creating it as part of that development, but it was
Right.
essentially created.
But the one that's going in, it's like, there's probably possibilities there that probably should be looked at. If you don't, there's never a no until you present these. So far.
Thank you, Jen.
Oh, sorry, I'll be next.
Good evening, Tom Masters.
And I'm June Schwenk. So question on the water, plan.
Mhm.
And goals of maintaining our public water. So you outlined the plan to sell the water. Is there a goal among the council to also pursue the path of maintaining our public water supply?
You know, speak to myself, for myself, that is exactly the goal, and when we pursue other options, it's to have things to compare against that goal.
Okay. So you have a goal and then you have a team to implement toward the goal?
We have a water supply team.
Alrighty, so that's great. We are very much in favor of the public water supply. And I think that was like very much expressed in the two meetings that we attended. So one of the questions is for getting the grant that was mentioned, I think 2.5 million to get the Hopewell Borough Park well going. You know, it needs filtration, as David had specified. Is there a timeline for that?
There's not a specific timeline. We've applied for the grant. The DEP has conveyed that to the EPA. The EPA came back with questions, and they explained this the other night. And we're actually gonna reconvene with the DEP this month to find out where that process is. We don't know whether the EPA, I mean, we haven't gotten approval from the EPA. It's a federal grant administered through the state. But the state is so the next stage is to sit down with them and find out what the status is with EPA.
So in town, since we have residents that work for some of these entities,
Which entities?
DEP, EPA,
Yeah.
we have people in town who are like in these organizations. Would it be a good idea to work with some of the residents to help get that process going faster?
So this process began with our meeting with Assistant Commissioner Patricia Gardner, who's second in command. I mean, one rung down from the agency commissioner and in charge of every department in the DEP that has the word water in it. That's where this began. And we're working with the team that she assigned to this, so. I mean, I understand what you're saying, but we're already there at the top of the pyramid of the people that are in charge of this and in frequent communication with them. That's
Maybe we
They-
misunderstood the frequent communication part, because it sounded like from the May meeting to the meeting this week.
I guess
that
if
it
your
was
question is
very-
that is this a grant opportunity that we should have people lobby the state for? I think not. I think we landed this one and they're working with us quite quickly on it. This is my take.
We have a determination from the state that we meet the criteria for the grant from their perspective, but the funding is coming from the US EPA. Okay, so they, when we met with them, this is originally back in November, and then finally we had the grant application submittal in February. They reviewed it, they reviewed the scope of work, we put together a detailed description of what we're going to do. And then hired an outside firm to do the engineering design, or not the design, but the engineer's estimate. They reviewed all that, they said it meets our criteria, it's a perfect fit, as a matter of fact. They were looking at us as the first applicant in this particular program, which is specifically designed for small and disadvantaged systems serving less than 10,000 people. It has all sorts of different elements of it that are specific to small municipalities like ours that don't have the bonding capacity, for example. So we bought for 2.3 million to do it. So they basically picked us as the poster child for this. But you're dealing with the US EPA on an issue involving PFAS, where they have just updated a new set of standards that are going to take effect in 5 years, where the entire country is going to be treating probably 80% of the wells in America. I mean, billions and billions of dollars. So I can't attest to what has to happen on the federal side, but they are our contacts with the federal side. I don't see any other path to that, and we have no reason to believe that they're not doing everything they can to make the process work. So we'll meet with them
But
again in
we're
August.
not hearing back on a regular
We're
basis
not-
about when this.
We are
grant is
scheduling a
expected.
hearing with them this August, which is what I just said.
If
When we last spoke with them, we said we will reconvene with you in August. And see where things are with the EPA and with the agency. That's.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because we just got the state versus school grant, which is also federal money through the state. And we submitted our application deadline was November 17th of 23. We heard we would hear an answer in late spring. We heard in July, and there was no communication between submitting it and then hearing that we were awarded. So I think it's, it's not a matter of like lobbying these organizations so much, it's just being patient, because sometimes they don't even have a definitive deadline for when they're gonna announce.
So they don't have response deadlines that they have to meet when there's an application, it just can go.
Yeah, I mean, we could sell our water.
I'll say it again, a
Right.
third time, we have said to them and agreed that we will meet with them in August. To discuss the status of the grant. I don't know what else to tell you.
Let me also add, let me put it perhaps slightly differently. I think I'm hearing that there's interest in hearing what other efforts we're doing. There's lots of stuff happening. We haven't been particularly vocal on that, because particularly in something like this, in our cost comparisons, we already assume that we're getting this. It's not like we're saying, here's what our water system is gonna be like if we don't get this grant, because we include getting it in there. And our focus for our recent outreach has not necessarily been on all of the things that we are doing in the regular course to bring the cost down. I'm hearing some desire to hear more of that. And
Yeah.
certainly happy to take that into consideration with our outreach. It's not super, in my mind, it's not really that, because this one in particular is kind of a wash cost wise and PFAS wise in thinking about the choices the community has to make as to whether to keep or sell the system. It's kind of led us to think the details of this have not been top of our list of things to talk about, but this is helpful to hear that those things would be helpful.
Yeah, I think that if that is a goal, that you would want to have a plan and a timeline and a team of experts that can support achieving that goal.
We
It's
have
just, we have that.
And just we have been,
We have two
there has
engineering firms, we have a water supply hydrogeologist there.
But-
Also explained
but
this
you're-
before, and we keep coming
okay.
back to the same place, as if somehow we're doing
Because
this
it's-
without any
It's
expertise.
20 years
I
of
don't
the
understand
issue,
it.
David. It's why are all the wells closed down? Why have these things not been addressed? And then-
Okay,
There was explained, right? So
It was
we have
explained.
that-
Let's look at the one.
Right, so we just, it's
It-
basically, if you would like to start, like, if we want to protect the public water supply and the management of it, and the capabilities of the system, then we really would like to hear more of a plan about how that is gonna be done. Because the other part of what we have heard in the presentations is the fact that in past years and what brought us to this place is that there has been no action, or the council has chosen at different junctures in the past not to take action.
Actually, that's not correct. Because in every case, when we had a treatment issue with the well, we spent substantial money doing pilot studies to look at the economics of treatment and the feasibility of treatment, and made a determination as to what the best course was going forward. We did this with the 2 wells at Burton Avenue, which were contaminated, well, not contaminated, but had naturally occurring uranium and naturally occurring radium, which, by the way, requires 2 separate treatment systems because they're completely different chemical characteristics. We spent months doing pilot studies. We hired 2 different companies to actually come in and do pilot studies of their technologies. We hired an outside consultant to look at the economics of it and give us a cost estimate for what the capital and operating costs would be over the long term. And on that basis, determined that it was uneconomical to be treating those radionuclides, that we didn't have the resources to do it. And that the better course was to actually have the interconnection with New Jersey American. That was doing nothing. That was doing a carefully structured economic analysis, which again, I have presented in the past. I know it's complicated. There's a lot of information. We didn't just sit on our hands and do nothing. The same thing was done with arsenic in well number 6. And at that time, we actually volunteered at a demonstration site for an arsenic treatment system that was developed by the Stevens Institute of Technology. The New Jersey Department of Environmental Protection spent about $100,000 doing oriented core, putting in a separate well, so they could understand the actual chemistry of arsenic in the aquifer at our well. We volunteered to be a demonstration site. We're the only municipality that did this. Then they came in and Stevens did their pilot studies, and they had a technology that was highly effective. The problem was we couldn't send the backwash from the sand filters to the Stony Brook Sewerage Authority because of a whole bunch of permitting issues that they would have. And that rendered that at that time uneconomical. We actually applied for a federal grant through Rush Holt's office for, I think it was $2.5 million, which would have allowed us to run that system. That grant was not funded. So, over the years, we put a lot of effort into these things. I'm not saying we made all the right decisions, right or wrong, but it's not as if we just sat there and sat on our hands and did nothing.
That's
There's a
not.
lot of
Nobody
analysis.
said sat on your hands and did nothing. That's what you're saying. That's not what I'm saying.
Well,
What I'm saying is that other municipalities have their own water sources, right? This is managed publicly in other municipalities. So if there's a goal of managing our public water, it would be a good idea, and I'm sure you all know this, to have the goal between the plan and the timeline for achieving it. So I think it's a good consideration to have a team. We have a lot of experts right here in Hopewell who would be happy to contribute to that. I don't understand why there's a resistance to this. It seems like the most,
I'll say, I don't know that there's any resistance other than, we would love if there, let me say, if there are people with expertise in this field, please approach us.
okay. And then the other municipalities that have their public water, so Pennington, Rocky Hill, et cetera.
Yes,
Is there an effort, part of your plan?
yes.
Is to reach out to them, and
Yes.
so when would that be happening?
So I mean, in the past, I suppose even, I mean, it's difficult to express everything that happens with the water system over the period of time. In the last couple of months, our focus has been on projecting what the future looks like at our current trajectory, the costs that we have to bear, the age of our system, the things that are coming towards us that will have an impact on our rates. So that is what we've been not just focused on, because there's also a lot of people focused on running the system, getting the grants to make it work, fixing pipes, all kinds of things to do with the most favorable prices for us as possible. And things like putting in a new pump and getting extra water out of it, maximizing a water leak repair with a road repair. I mean, those things happen all the time. And while we're not shouting that from the rooftops, because there's only so much time to communicate with the public, the direction from a communications and information sharing point is to focus on what we think. And even with really big assumptions like we would get half of everything paid by someone else, a very aggressive, we think, grant schedule, and project these costs and a very, very aggressive possible grant receipt plan. And it's not a plan so much as what would it look like if we got all these free things, where people did all this stuff for us for free, or a large percentage of it, and what would it look like? What would we be paying? What would our system be paying? And that's the kind of information we've been trying to present, to say, here is what say New Jersey American charges, and here is what we charge now. Here is what we think we'll be charging in 10 years if we get half of all this stuff for free. Here is what we would charge if we don't get that, and try to have some basis on all of our palette for a time in the next perhaps year, where we have a number, possibly from one or two parties that can say, here's how we could do your system, here's how we could serve Hopewell, and here's what we would charge.
Right.
And honestly, until then, we'll keep, the work to see what our costs are going to be into the future is the same work that we do to see how to get the grant for someone to pay for it. It's the same work to see how, where do we buy the pipes from to repair a water main. So it's just the packaging of it, we felt would be quite relevant for people to see in our best case scenario of keeping it right now. Again, even assuming we're to get a lot of free money. And I know there's some back and forth about whether we're gonna get the the EPA PFAS money. I'll be honest, in our financial projections, we assume it's in the bag, because we honestly, I think it would be unfair to say, well, actually, it's $12 million of cost, because we think we're gonna get this. But our goal or focus just on explaining what we think the consideration is going to be is, well, here's the best we can do on costs. Again, even assuming dump trucks of free money coming, and we're working to get that, and we want to get it, and that's what our focus is. So that we know when someone comes with an offer, whether it makes sense or not, or have some basis to compare. And I hope the perception is that while that's happening, that there's not a ton of just regular work, our consultants, our volunteers, beating the pavement, begging our legislators, putting in for federal and state appropriations, working with our consultants on different grant opportunities towards that. And we are, but we were doing that a few months ago, we were doing that last year, and we're gonna continue to do that. But just as far as explaining to the public what choice is gonna be coming up, that hasn't, I'm hearing that should be a bigger focus, and we'll add that information.
Yeah, and also how the work is gonna get done. Obviously, it'll be difficult, right? The work that needs to be done is substantial. And so the council isn't personally going to do all of this work. So it seems like, as Krista did work on council person Weaver did with the traffic committee work. There's a team of people who help get that work done. So for a substantial goal, like protecting our public water asset, then I would think that you have more, you will need more resources. And I don't see that. It's not apparent. So it maybe you're saying it's just a communication thing, but I'm not seeing it.
Beyond the water supply planning committee of 3 council members, 2 different engineering firms, 2 different hydrogeologists.
I think one of the differences perhaps
our bond counsel and fiscal consultants, Phoenix advisors who presented here. I mean, those are the resources that we have that we're using to look at this. So what resources do you think are missing? So let me finish my question. What resources do you think are missing from that list?
No, I think that obviously they took the inventory of our water system, right? And have outlined that, but if the goal is to get 3
But that's how they got
wells
to a report, and that's not all that they're
one
doing.
element of the report. The rest of this is a conversation we've been having between all of our professionals for 2 years So. I'm just not clear on what it is you think is missing from this.
I think the takeaway has been that your position is to sell the water system.
No,
We've said multiple times that we're just.
did I ever say anything about selling the water system during my presentation? Did I ever mention anything, did I advocate for selling the water system during my entire presentation? What did I say? I said at the outset, if we are going to stay in business, that was my first phrase, and Tom, you know, you're nodding because you heard me. These are the things that we would have to do. Okay, it wasn't an attempt to skew the scales one way or the other. It was an attempt to put information in front of the public so that we can make a realistic decision based on a clear understanding of what our obligations are going forward, should we stay in business. That was the sole purpose of that presentation. So your perception that we seem to be tilting in one direction is, I think, your perception. I don't think it's justified based on what's
It might not be
done.
only mine. Yeah,
Another thing I'll say here is that I think this issue, while we will continue to get as much, that last meeting, there's no statute that says you're supposed to have these meetings. There's no statute that says you're supposed to mail things and bring everyone into a room and listen to them and try to get feedback. We're gonna keep doing it. I will say, though, that maybe a little different on the continuum of issues that we have. Maybe on one hand, traffic safety, where I wrote the ordinance. I think it was a very successful crowdsourcing effort, both partially on the technical things, but when you think about when I look in front of my house, right, I'm familiar with the safety issues visually and as from an inventory perspective of traffic, of sidewalks, of street, and it worked as a crowdsourced information gathering effort. On the other extreme, we've got, our bond rate, right? Am I gonna go, do I think we should go door to door, and try to get every citizen's opinion about how to best pursue a lower bond rate? There's people who are good at that. People have no idea what that means. I might be one of them. But there's hyper technical things where we're gonna lean more towards our experts. We're gonna hire engineers. We have many, our financial consultants to help us through this, working with the state. Does that mean we're not gonna try to get information from our residents? Does it mean that we're not gonna, if someone has a really good idea or contact, or is an engineer like David is, that we're not gonna try to get, sorry, hydrologist, if I could?
That's okay. Hydrologist is kind of, really.
So on one hand, bring us the talent and we will work with them.
Okay.
But from a, on the spectrum of things of this issue, where for I was gonna say totally crowdsourced situation, there are some issues that are really, really good at that. We're probably more in the middle where we need more help. And I don't mean from a quantity perspective, although we'll take it, but the type of advice we need is technical. It is, it involved public-private partnerships. There's lots of issues with state finance that are not layperson issues. So to the extent there are people with those credentials, please bring them to us.
Okay.
We'll, I don't know what else to say, and I feel like we, that the door's open.
I mean, there's no question, we're interested in looking at all the options, believe me. If there's a way to keep this utility and run it in a way that's responsible, that with costs that don't drive our businesses out of town, I'll be the first one to do it. I'm not the one who wants to surrender my well house keys, I can tell you. So, and as far as talking to other municipalities and seeing how they're dealing with the same challenges, absolutely, you're right, we need to do that. We've already started some outreach with Rocky Hill, we've gotten some good information from them. Certainly Flemington is one we want to talk to, although I can see why they're doing a lot better, because they have a lot more people in a huge commercial corridor to buy water from them, but no, we want to find out how they're doing and why and how they manage these things, and same with Pennington. I mean, there's always lessons to be learned what other people are doing.
Yeah, no,
Absolutely, but
there was one thing, David, that in the presentation that I really liked was that comparison, right, where the case would go in a couple of years.
yeah,
And I know you presented that New Jersey American Water, you know, their rates would be lower in 5 years from now and whatnot. But we really have to understand that a little better,
Yeah.
because if they buy our system for 5 million. And they do the same investments that we would do. Or force them to do, whatever we negotiate. And even with grants, you know, minus the grants, that would probably be at least 8 million minus grants. They want a return on that money. And I think the rates are gonna be higher than what was presented.
Well,
Because they want to make a profit on those investments.
well, the thing is though, Tom, that
The purchase price, you know.
Right, no, and what you're saying is absolutely something we need to understand, it's also part of any negotiating process to understand it, but. You know, it's the scenario, if in fact we were to sell to New Jersey American. Would be that we would be part of the tariff area, that this entire surrounding area, in other words, there wouldn't be a specific. Rate structure specific to Hopewell to recover those costs, I mean, that's. Because if it were that way, there would be no point. Why would we do it? Because they would just be adding, I mean, we're a nonprofit, American profit. But the point is hopefully to have a scenario, if it happens, where those costs are spread out across all their ratepayers across the state of New Jersey, right? And if you look at their tariff schedules and you look at their rates in different regions, and I've read the rates don't vary that much from one part of New Jersey to the other. There are some places where they're lower, and there are also areas where the rates are less because their municipalities are buying or they're you know, larger quantities, or there are all sorts of different tariffs. But the point is the tariffs that apply, for example, to Princeton and this whole surrounding area are not much higher than they are anywhere else in the state, or in fact, probably, you know, comparable. So the real, it would only work, let's put it that way, if in fact all those costs, those capital costs are being distributed across. And for example, this is especially true with the lead service lines, because you got a lot of people out there that don't have lead service lines because their developments are all new and there were no lead piping at all, but they're paying a lead service line surcharge as well. And by the way, we're paying one right now for lead service line replacements that they're doing in other towns. I mean, that's how it works, as unfair as it seems. I just got our bill today and they've raised their lead service line surcharge a little bit. So that's part of the question, is to what extent do we benefit from the spreading out of those capital costs across their entire New Jersey ratepayer system? If we were in a situation where they bought the system and said, well, now we're gonna hit you up for, you know, the surcharge because we have to do this, it wouldn't work. The scenario usually involving a sale is where they agree to hold the existing rates for a defined period of time, usually 3 to 4 years. In this case, we don't want them to hold our rates for 3 or 4 years. If that happens, we would want to be on that regional tariff as soon as possible under that scenario, right? Because literally the rates are half. So, and I guess the other thing, and again, lots to look at, and it's all in the details of if we solicit proposals, what those proposals are. You know, how are the rates addressed? What do they agree to? And then, you know, assuming that after that 3 to 4 year period, whatever happens, then everyone in New Jersey is pretty much in the same boat, right? That's buying from them, or Veolia, or whoever it is. I mean, it's possible that, you know, there'd be interest from Veolia. But I know, for example, if you look, and I don't know where the rates were in Lambertville when they sold, which was in the early 2000s. So originally United Water, then it became Suez, now it's Veolia. But I looked at their tariff and their regional tariffs for Veolia, which are also a public record. And they're basically the same or slightly less than the New Jersey American numbers. So here we are roughly 20 years after that system was sold. Now, I don't know what Lambertville's water cost when it was sold. It may have been less. I don't have the circumstances for that. I tried to find out. Because that's another thing about this that I'm working on, along with all this other stuff, is looking at the histories, the rate histories of places that did sell, like what happened, right? And there are some that are more recent than others, but there are a series of them that were listed in our fiscal report by Phoenix Advisors when they were developing the comparables for what they thought our system might be worth. And so I've started that process, but you know, what were the rates before, what are the rates now? What circumstances, just understanding how that worked out. And then, you know, I know there's also concerns about, well, okay, that all might be fine in the next 10 years, but what about 30 years from now? And you know, at some point, there's no way to know. But I think, I mean, oddly enough, I mean, I grew up in Princeton and we had Elizabethtown Water then, which was a pretty large utility. And then they eventually sold to New Jersey American, but and we didn't really have a problem with it, you know, so it's, and I, believe me, for all the sort of emotional attachment that people have to our system, I share that. I mean, I have, otherwise I wouldn't have been spending all the time that I'm
It's
spending
more than
working on this.
emotional attachment, yeah, it's a precious resource.
I
And
agree.
so at the very least on the DEP grant, are they aware that the of the emergent condition declaration?
Yes,
Since
yes.
after the
Correct.
application?
They,
Okay,
they know about all of it, to give you an idea, so before we actually, submitted our application under WIPA for their review, we got a conference call that literally had 24 people on the Zoom call. I don't know how they organized it, but we had the Board of Public Utilities, we had the NJDEP, we had the state, was it the Treasury?
DCA.
DCA, but also the Office of the Controller, I think, as well. Basically, there's an enormous network of people that are all involved and watching us and interacting with us, and basically everybody in the department knows what we're doing. And the grant, and so we have the grant people too, and this was also originally orchestrated by the assistant director.
And they know because we approached them and said, here's what we think you're doing, let's help us talk us through all of these things together, frankly. And it's not like quite one-stop shopping, but they're helping us explore all of our options.
Yeah, actually, we originally approached the assistant commissioner to say, help, because we have this PFAS compliance issue, even though our PFAS numbers have met your standard now for 2 years. And, you know, this is a really big lift for us to do. And then that started the whole conversation about the grant opportunities and so on. But believe me, everybody knows Hopewell now. I mean, we went to the top, and fortunately, Assistant Commissioner Gardner is just superb. And I will tell you this too, and this was really heartening to me, that there was a real sense of commitment on the part of the department of the DEP to help us and other small towns like us keep our water utilities if it's possible. I mean, because, you know, I've heard people say, oh, the DEP probably wants everyone to just sell out, it's easier, there's less to regulate. Not the people that were in that room.
no, they know.
Oh, they know, no, they think there's value in it, just like we think there's value in it, there's value in being a small town. I was sure more people in Trenton that thought there was value in being a small town, but,
All right.
but just so you know, I mean, I just want to reassure you, and I'm sorry if I got testy, and just getting really exhausted with all this, because it's been a lot of work, so forgive me. We really are looking at every option we possibly can. I mean, it's not as if we've just thrown in the towel and said, oh, we're just gonna sell the thing, it's not gonna work. And if that was our decision, we would still have to defend it by showing that we have done full due diligence on all the options.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I hope you're reassured to some degree that that's the case. You know, we're not trying to just push this thing through.
Good. Thanks for your comment.
Thank you. You're welcome.
All right.
Thank you,
Good.
appreciate
Thank
it.
you.
Hi, it's Gloria Anton. I'm going back to 57 Hopewell Center, please. I live at 4345 Lafayette Street, directly across from the stream. We all talk about flooding. It's not really flooding, it's groundwater that comes up. Interestingly enough, I'm in the house, 45 for 18 years. We bought 43 12 years ago. Since I'm there, 45 has gotten groundwater, some pump overflow 3 times. 43, no. Okay, so obviously there's some sort of stream or something running along the one side of the property. Now, I noticed when the pumps that I was told 3 weeks ago are illegal, pumping the water from the building into the sewer, or whatever they're pumping it into. When they're not running, my sump pump, and I have 3 on one side, is bone dry mud. When they're pumping, water appears. Now, every house from Hamilton to Maple has gotten some pump overflow, not flooding. When Honore and Ida came, I woke up and there was water in my front yard up to my front door. The house, unfortunately, next to me, the water flood went right into their basement, but that's global warming, okay? My question is, when the building gets knocked down and there's no more basement that absorbs all that water, what's gonna happen to Lafayette Street? And you wanna tear that down and there's groundwater there. We need a meeting to, because I have PTSD, every time it rains, I have PTSD, I don't sleep at night, I really don't, because I hear my. And I can't even sleep up in my bedroom because of the noise, so I need somebody to calm me down, because I love my house, I love the neighborhood, I love the neighbors, I love the town. But this is killing me, okay, and everybody else that lives on my street. And that's all I have to say about that, but I will have one more question. When are you gonna work on the bistro? What happened?
That we can answer, yeah.
Yeah.
So, they came back before the planning board for an adjustment to their,
Yeah.
approvals, just, a month and a half ago. And, our, I don't know, our.
Winter's coming.
When I took office, one of the first things I did was gave those folks a call, had a good conversation about what they needed, where they were at, and the challenge they had. I can be very specific about what they were, but they, were back, to adjust their approvals, which is a very good sign, because they, are ready to go and are eager to invest in our town. So I'll say soon.
I hope so, because you know, that was like an anchor, I mean, it really kind of was. And the other thing is, the Runyon property is looking beautiful.
Yeah.
And I think you should try to get those guys to do something on the corner. Here, Castro, right?
No,
What, no?
no.
The steel for the inn is coming in at the end of the month.
It's all over the place and they ran out of steel. I don't know. That sounded a little fishy to me.
Yeah, it's custom fabricated, whatever.
But please, let's please have a meeting about this, you know, I can visualize that the property on 47 Hopewell Center would look beautiful. It would look a lot nicer than it does now, but before you get to the traffic situation and the overpopulation, you gotta start from the ground where the water, I mean, I don't even think that's even feasible to build on, as far as I'm concerned. None of the houses that we live in should have really been built on those properties, to be honest. Because of the high water table. I mean, I have one side of the house that gets flooded and one doesn't get some pump overflow. And she.
We don't mind.
Help, please help.
For our next speaker, I saw our planning board chairperson is here, and I know you had your hand up. I don't know if there was something you wanted to add in here. I give you that courtesy if you wanted to, Peter.
Say was they've started on the bistro. They poured concrete last week and they were out there with the transit earlier this week. Yeah, they're not there every day, but they have started to work.
It's not gonna be the same.
Oh, it'll be nice though. It's, I mean, I could see how it had to be redone, definitely, but. Nice place to hang out.
Thank you both, Peter, for volunteering to be here, chair for planning board. And two, for everyone, you know, we do our best to keep our meetings free flowing and informal. As we get more interest in our topics, it gets a little harder. We do our best to kind of keep them informal. With that though, I just want to direct everyone to our next speaker. Just so that we can, as more people start talking and back and forth, particularly for those on Zoom from the back room or kind of facing that way, it just doesn't work mechanically. So thank you all for, cooperating. It might seem like it works here, but it doesn't work as much online for those watching. So just as a cautionary tale about, while we'd love to keep a free flowing chat back and forth, there are some reasons why we can't sometimes. So with apologies,
Yeah.
the floor is yours.
So good to see everybody. I'm Kate Toth. I had a couple questions about the water also. So I guess the first question is, could you explain the anticipated timeline, just like general milestones in terms of, just how the whole process would roll out and when you anticipate like a council vote being and what the steps are before that?
I'll do my best, and this is kind of summarizing, and hopefully, because it's taped, I'll say the same things I said on Tuesday. If I didn't, apologies, and we'll figure out the differences, and Lisa can chime in here as well. But under the process that we've started, the Water Infrastructure Protection Act process, the next step would be to draft with our professionals, when we're ready, a RFQ, or request for qualifications. That is a document that we would put out to the world, advertise, and seek qualified bidders, public or private, who might be interested in talking to us about running our system. So we think that takes a month or two, a couple of months at least, to both develop the document, advertise, get it out there into the world of prospective bidders, and then to get that back, evaluate it. The evaluation itself, Lisa, tell me if I'm wrong, is actually a council action to accept, hey, company A, B, and C are qualified. That would be a public meeting and a resolution to do that. So at that point, a couple months from now, possibly, we've got a list of qualified bidders. Then we'll put together an RFP, a request for proposals, which is our kind of for sale sign flag, the document that says, here, we're Hopewell Borough, here's the things that are important to us, it's lowering our rates, commitments to service, a pile of cash, this is what we think our system is worth. The things outlining and the expectations for one of those qualified bidders to come back and give us a proposal. That document itself would take some time to put together. When it's done, it gets put out, similar to how we're buying, if we're buying dump trucks or looking for a bidder to pave a road. But that's another couple of months to put that together, get it out there. That too is advertised in the newspaper, I believe, and in the industry publicly to get those proposals back. At that point, we would get proposals, evaluate them first, informally and privately amongst council. At that point, if any of them, I think, came close to things that we thought were worth advancing, there would be under that process an opportunity to negotiate with one of those bidders. For example, one of the concerns I had is if, say, bidder number one says, we'll give you $5 million for your system, but we are not going to do anything for your rates. That's not something that I feel is very helpful, and I would expect to engage them in a discussion about, well, actually, what would you commit to do for our rates on a going forward basis, or how quickly can you get us to the same rates that Princeton and Montgomery pay, or how long can you keep them there? And engage in that discussion. If those go well enough to have something that this council feels is worth pursuing, we would then likely, and this is where Lisa might help me a bit, start kind of a public vetting process to get to a point where we might have a resolution designating one of the, a suitor, and what the terms would be. At which point, a whole series then of, I'll say, help, but vetting, from the various parts of the state of New Jersey, whether it be BPU, DEP. At one point, I believe if the program involves money coming to us, the state gets to help us, I say, decide what it'd be used for. First, it has to be debt service, but they'd have to prove our plan to use the funds. So that enters into, and I'm kind of paraphrasing, because there is in the Phoenix report on our website, a kind of a more exhaustive list of what happens at that point. But we're looking at months and months, I suppose, of after we've gotten to something perhaps that we're comfortable with, even, asking the community to say yes to, a series of approvals from the state to see if they agree with us. And at the culmination of all that, we envision a very public process for council to make a decision as to whether to accept or not, such approval. Lisa, how many of the dozens of extra steps did I miss?
Well, no. Well, actually, I believe there are 4 or 5, more resolutions that would actually have to be adopted to get to the final contract. For that, and that would be the last of the resolution. So there's so many approvals, and that's just the municipality. Then you also have the BPU that looks at the rates, make sure they're fair. If there's actually a vendor that's selected, the BPU has to have hearings, and the DCA makes a decision as well on the use of the funds to pay off debt, and there's a whole list of what we need to do to demonstrate compliance, but there's qualifications, then there's an RFP, and then at every stage, there's, like I said, there's an opportunity for and requirement for council to make a decision. And then in terms of timing, I mean, it's, I think you can get through qualifications relatively quickly, but you can get them out on the street, but you don't know what comes back. If you don't get what you want back, you'd have to start over. So it could be a long process, and we don't know how long the BPU and the DCA would take.
Thank you, that was really helpful.
Sorry.
No, so for the RFP and RFQ, just to clarify, would that be going out with the same one, be going out to both folks that might privatize and also people that would be looking to upgrade the system so we can maintain it?
This would only be to privatize. That's really what's on the table right now. But, I mean, I don't know if there's.
If there was actually an opportunity for somebody to somehow lease or operate the system, we talked about that as an option, but I think what our fiscal advisors have said is that usually those are venture capital firms, and the problem is you still own the system and you still have all the regulatory liability that goes with the system, and if anything changes, they just tack on more fee, and so it's probably not. He said it just didn't, there's very few circumstances where that would work. I mean, I suppose if you had some arrangement with a public entity, but I mean, but for the most part, I think if we're talking about the WIPO process, it would really be a sale to, because they're all privately owned, the large utilities are privately owned. And that's the trick, because again, underlying all this is the debt service and the debt for all the capital projects. I don't know who else would take that on other than a large company that could spread those costs out. That's the dilemma.
But maybe to put it slightly different way, so the WIPA process that we just outlined, it could be a sale or a lease, so we'll probably have all of those options as well. We've been kind of advised of at least one that doesn't tend to work, we might not get any requests to do that or any good ones. Some of those other options, if they came up, don't require us to go through this onerous process necessarily, so as those things come up, we can pursue them separately, but they don't have to wait necessarily for this, 6 months to get to the RFP for a possible sale or lease. If, I don't know, Trenton Waterworks, comes knocking at the door and would like to do some kind of other type of arrangement, there's limited number, the state of New Jersey only has so many ways that, groups can work together, there are some statutes that allow unique arrangements, there are shared service agreements, so for example, there've been the thought that, while we're a member of many cooperative purchasing groups already, that if perhaps we were to kind of do a shared service agreement with Pennington or one of these other towns, that doesn't necessarily have to wait or be part of this process, so just to make that clear, that while this is the kind of onerous approval timeline that we'd have to go through to ever get to the point of sale or lease, those other things could be happening in the interim and don't have to wait till the end of this or even be part of this very rigid approval process.
Right, and in parallel to this whole WIPA process, we're still exploring options, like, is there a realistic scenario under which we can keep the system? And if that includes cooperative arrangements with other public systems, you know, that help on the operational side. Again, nobody's gonna take on our debt service. There's no reason why they would, but those are all things. And again, as I mentioned earlier, just looking at other systems and how they're handling the same challenges, you know, so. It's a good question you asked about the timeline, because there's a fairly long timeline, and so while we're looking at this WIPA process, we're still looking at all these other elements of. What's possible in terms of grant funding, in terms of, you know, the things that we would have to do if we expand again, because the other thing is, you could go through this process. And you could find that the best offer that you get is not a very compelling offer. And there's no commitment to accepting that offer, right? I mean, you might find that in the end, it's just not gonna, selling the system isn't gonna work because the terms aren't acceptable. And you have to find a way to make this work. So we don't know what the outcome is gonna be. And I think that's an important thing for people to remember, is that, you know, but we won't know what that option is until we go far enough down that path to actually interact with potential buyers and see what's possible.
And I guess, I know it sounds like you guys have been doing a lot, that hasn't, or, you know, that we're finding out about, and you've been trying to get out, there's a lot of nuances. So I guess my question related to that is, it seems like there should be some kind of more public competitive bidding on the other side as well, rather than, I know it sounds like you're working with experts and have a advisory firm, but to make sure that you're getting the most competitive bid, it might make sense to do a parallel RFP, RFQ for keeping for making those upgrades within our own system and not privatizing it, rather than, you know, pursuing them, you know, independently and having the process be less public, or just like a wider call for it.
Let's get, so just so I understand, so are you talking about a bidding process from the public sector, in other words, or what would be the, I wasn't quite clear.
Yeah, no, so, and maybe I'm just not understanding the process
No.
to not privatize it.
Sure, yeah.
But I assume the process would be that we would hire people to do that work for us.
Well, so if we do nothing, right, and I want to say do nothing, no one ever stops doing lots of things. But if we were to never talk about the possibility of exploring what kind of deal we would get with privatization, we would be doing what you're saying. So, for example, I don't want to be too specific or start making things up because I'll be wrong, but you know, a few months ago, we needed a new pump. We put out a procurement to buy it. Sometimes we got things from our cooperative purchasing arrangement, we could buy it differently. You know, on Tuesday, we talked through, you know, 10-year kind of capital schedule. We get to year 3 and we're talking about, I don't know, new meters, again, making this stuff up that's not on there.
Right.
We would do that. It would be, you know, one of the most advantageous procurement option to get that, whether it's a shared service with another organization, whether it's buying it from a co-op that we're part of. And for those who are not procurement nerds like some of us are, when you're buying stuff as a government, there's a lot of different ways to do it. One way is what's called public bidding. You just put it out there. You have to buy, you know, you just buy the cheapest one that comes. There are ways where other qualified sellers or vendors are on what's called a state contract. It means the state's already vetted them and gotten a price. And we can just buy from that and not go through our own procurement process. There's something called competitive contracting, which is a little bit like what WIPA is, where you have a little bit more flexibility in negotiating for something a little bit more unique. And then there's these cooperative groups, of which we're a member of many, and Doug's even brought us into some new ones to get some better deals on things, where big groups of municipalities and colleges go together and buy things either in bulk or get the best deal on things. And when they do that, we have access to their good deal and buy things that way. So we do that. We may, for each of these pieces of work that we do, you know, we have our council or committee doing things, we have an administrator and staff. But really, we only have at the moment one employee for the water system. So most of the work, when the leak, in the last couple of months, there were several leaks fixed on Broad Street. When that happened, we put out to bid, we actually have outside contractors do that. And as we do bigger projects, it could be a procurement for a bigger project with outside contractors, or it might be working with Trenton Water Works, or probably not them, or Pennington or another group to kind of cooperate and do it together. But at each while we're focused on talking about what it might look like to do this, because we want to get to the point where we can see what we would get and compare it. Each of those things that we need to do, we will be continuing to do, and would be, for the most part, through RFP processes like that, bringing in a qualified company to help us do a new water main and or investigate our reservoir for either reconstruction or rehabilitation.
Okay, no, that makes a lot of sense. Thank you for explaining all the nuances, the procurement process in this level. Yeah, just the reason I asked that question is just to make sure, you know, that we understand all the options when comparing them, so there's a real true comparison.
Yeah.
And I'm sorry, this is taking so long. Because the process, it sounds like will take about a year, that's what I assume, something around that. It sounds like it might be helpful to have, I know there are folks internally working on it in council and otherwise. To have like a citizens committee that's updated and can be in more direct conversation about it. I know there are public meetings, other those kind of things. But I mean, I would just suggest that maybe there's a small group that can, you know, be focused on this and, you know, provide feedback and the RFP or just make sure all those things are, just to make it feel like, you know, the citizens of Hopewell have more direct input into it. And so then obviously by the end, folks will feel more comfortable with whatever the result is. So I would just put that out there as a suggestion.
But you're thinking, it's like, I happen to know, like from a procurement perspective, we happen to, I won't say what street, but there are people who work, you know, who do work with state and run, you know, statewide procurement things. Are you thinking that type of people or more, and I'll say a wider net of, you know, when you say citizens, I'm thinking like that sometimes it's a very wide group and kind of gets back to the situation we talked about a few, not more than a few minutes ago, I suppose.
Yeah.
About, you know, whether it's, we've got some particular expertise on it, or if it's more just to help get the word out and filter things. Again, I'm just thinking out loud about.
Yeah, no, I mean, and not having originated one of this before, but having been on commission in the former town I lived in, New Jersey, I think you might be able to put out a request for interest and the types of experts you might want to fill that, and then you could have include also, if, you know, if there are 10 people, include 2 that are just, you know, general folks that just have general interest, but might not bring expertise. So, you know, something on and someone from procurement, maybe like a water expert, those kind of things. Or financing, all that kind of stuff, you know, to include both more general stuff and more specific. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
And sorry, there's just one, and it's not a question. I would just say, there's a lot of research, I mean, Dave, like you were saying, you know, looking into what the rates look like over time. And it seems that there's fairly a consensus that rates do increase, whether, you know, whether it occurs immediately or after a couple decades. So I would say, I know we're not at this point yet, but just to keep in the back of your minds that this is a longer term discussion, I think, and that it's not a question of, you know, what our rates look like in 5 years or even 15, but more like what the situation looks like in 80 or 100. And so maybe a privatization bid comes in slightly lower, but that might not be worth it for the future of the community. So, thank you.
Just real fast, I'll be very brief. Speaking of water and resources and outcomes. This area is so rich. I mean, it's amazing, the people and the wealth of knowledge. This report was by former councilman Tom DeLessio, who teaches a course at Rutgers. And his students came to Hopewell and Manville, and an amazing report. It was given to the planning board, and I don't know if it ever made its way to the council, but it talks about this whole idea of redevelopment and multifamily housing and transit and buses and needing how David's got maps and graphs and charts, just like you're doing for the water. I mean, it's very steady. So that one, and then Susan Bristol, who spoke at the planning board meeting, she's from the watershed. She's an architect from the watershed. She produced a 75-page report. She produced a 25-page report all about rainwater and the water problem and flooding and whatnot. And I think we just submitted recently to the council and the planning board. So I just want to say, it's wonderful when you have free resources to do a book report, you know, or a thesis on how to do redevelopment. Other thing, just a little follow-up. In terms of the timeline, getting back to 57. I think the redevelopment, what do you call it, the agreement has already been signed, or is like close to being signed, according to my conversations with Jeffrey Albert. And he is planning to submit this fall, could be October, November, definitely by the end of the year. If you decide to make an amendment to this ordinance, I understand, please correct me if I'm wrong, this is a legal thing, and I'm trying to understand it, is that if you agree as a council, because it's an ordinance, it has to go back to the zoning board, which is part of the planning board, but zoning board, for them to look at it, and then it goes back to you. It can be a 2 or 3 month process. And then we have lovely August, and the planning board actually canceled a meeting, their August meeting. That's another problem, but it's almost like a race now. If you decide to make this amendment, and if it happens after he submits, he's gonna work with the rules that are in order right now. So this is a really close race. If you're gonna amend it. So, any comments?
I'll just speak to a procedural thing. That's
Actually,
not
one-
specific, but.
Okay, if it's, I know it's specific. Okay.
It's not specific. The process, as I understand it, for redevelopment is that a redevelopment agreement is executed prior to a site plan application, not the other way around.
Correct.
And I can't comment on anything specifically with this, but,
But it has to happen first, but I'm saying if that happens this week or next week, he could submit in October or November, he told me so. Or by the end of the year, and I'm saying if there is an amendment, time is of the essence.
Well, just say in general, a developer's agreement has to be approved by council by resolution.
Oh, okay. That's good
So,
to know.
and that's
that's what I was getting at.
Okay.
Actually, is, yeah,
just, for instance, there's another one for the Hopewell Bistro on for tonight.
right.
Developer's agreement, because it has to be approved by resolution, so,
Okay,
and there's no other such resolution on the agenda.
and I will say, he is, if the ordinance is amended, which he really would like to happen, he doesn't mind delaying his project because it gets him a better product. It makes his calculation of his building better. It also makes it better for Hopewell. It's a really win-win. But he needs to know because his engineers are starting to draw this up this week. So I just want to put that out there. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Francois Gilman. My questions are much simpler and won't take so long. Thank you for your patience. I see that this town is really lucky to have you guys. My request for tonight is to try and understand the process or the protocols that I need to go through to put together the signage that I want to do at the train station. I've been struggling with my structural engineer to get the balance of the drawings that I wanted, and finally got them this week. I had hoped to make the adjustments in my drawings for you for tonight, but I couldn't do it in time. But I will have them ready for next meeting. But the other thing is, I would very much like to convene at the train station to confer where we can put this together. I've scoped it out a few times and have about 3 or 4 locations, but it's gonna be up to you guys. Or to all of us.
Let me say, well, first, for those who may not quite follow what we're talking about here. There's been a very generous offer for incredibly neat art installation at our historic or around our historic train station. And which I think we're all pretty excited about and very, very thankful for you to bring to us. I'll suggest that perhaps you and I and Doug could connect. We can set a meeting up and talk about, you know, the mechanics and because the challenges will probably have a subcommittee of council who could go and maybe take a look. We could all be there, but it tends to be challenging from a notice perspective. Actually, I put something in the newspaper, we're all gonna be in the same room together, if you believe it. So perhaps we can connect with Doug maybe next week and you know, and set up a time to talk about some of the mechanics of this. If that works.
Okay. aside from a set of drawings, is there anything else that I need to submit to you guys? I did bring the sign here a couple of times.
It's really neat. So from a mechanical perspective, I'll be honest, I honestly have no idea. I think technically to accept the gift, we do an ordinance to accept it, but.
Resolution.
Resolution. So that's easy. That takes half the amount of time. We'll, again, maybe we could sit down and talk about, how any of that works, to be honest with you. I don't know if I have any particular magical insight into how it works.
Okay, well, I suppose, I mean, I've never been to that, so I'm in the lurch. I suppose, your next meeting is in a month and I should come back then. Is there a different time when I can submit drawings? Because I'd really like to get started right away.
Sure, so I mean, most things that have any kind of level of complication for council like this, usually involve us working with our administrator offline, and then when the understanding of what needs to be done, what paperwork there is kind of thought out with the help of our attorney and administrator, then we bring it here kind of just ready to go, more or less, or discuss the substantive kind of policy part of it. So I think rather than you just coming back to a meeting like this and probably most of us here not really sure, not knowing really what technically the answer is about how we should do this, we'll talk with our administrator and attorney offline, get back with you, so that by the time we have the next meeting, we'll know what this body, if anything, needs to do. If it's a resolution that says, thank you, we accept, and we'll do that. If it's something else, we'll figure it out and do that at that time.
Okay,
That works?
that works fine.
And it's, with few exceptions, the first Thursday of every month.
Okay, I'll be here.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Francois.
Not seeing any other folks in person. We do have one person online. Charlie, I'm gonna promote you if you're still there, and put that up on the screen.
Hello.
So if you mind introducing yourself and where you're from.
Absolutely. I'm Charlie Cradaville. I'm the Central Jersey organizer here at Food and Water Watch. We have our New Jersey office in New Brunswick, and we are opposing water privatization on behalf of our 72,000 members around the state. And I really appreciate the opportunity to speak to you all tonight remotely. I think it's great for transparency's sake and public access that folks can participate both in person and remotely. And I also want to say thank you to the borough clerk for the quick response to my Oprah request. Mayor, thank you for agreeing to meet with us tomorrow. I just want to confirm we're on to meet tomorrow on Zoom.
That is correct. Yeah, thank you for getting back to me on that.
Great. Yeah, really looking forward to that. And yeah, we look forward to discussing the pitfalls of privatization, alternatives to privatization, and the petition that's been going around. And I did want to clarify my remarks on that petition. I know not referring to the petition that was mentioned earlier tonight, but rather the one we talked about Tuesday night, the one that would protest the privatization and put that to the voters. And I did want to just clarify, there is no specific date in the petition for when the vote would be, but it does have the language that says, quote, at the next general election. And so, yeah, I just wanted to clarify that that's the language that's in the petition that's been circulated. And again, thank you to everyone who helped circulate it and everyone who signed it. And yeah, looking forward to continuing the dialogue with you, Mayor. And yeah, I'll continue to make myself available. If you have any questions, I welcome them.
Charlie, thank you so much, and I'm glad that the Zoom works. It's not always that technically things work, but glad it worked tonight, and look forward to talking to you tomorrow. Thanks so much.
Great, thanks. Good night.
With that, I will take a motion to close the.
Can I just ask a follow-up question? I'm sorry.
Please come forward first so we can make sure we get you on. Online.
I just want to ask, like there were a gigantic amount of people at the last meeting to talk about the potential building in the Lafayette area. Tonight you got a petition that's over 150 people. There were some people who tried to get on and they couldn't. Obviously, there's a lot of interest in it. We've asked for a meeting with council talking directly to us. I don't think people want to be lectured to by the planner. Are you gonna let us know if we get that meeting?
Well, I can't respond.
I know you.
And so, Chris, if you wanna.
Yeah, I
perhaps
think,
address
if you don't mind giving us some time to review the petition and then
Oh,
we can.
that, yeah.
If we were to have a meeting, we have to notice it and do all the things according to.
Yeah,
that,
that's
so
fine.
We need to just look into how we set that up and review the information first.
Okay, all right, and you'll let everybody know?
Well, yeah.
Okay, thank you very much.
And just as far as like letting people know things, if you're not already signed up, please sign up for the weekly email blast from the borough, because that's a good way to get information. And of course, always check the website.
Believe it or not everybody does. I do.
Thank you. With that, I will accept a motion to close public comment.
I will motion.
Okay, thank you.
I'll second.
Next, item 8, we got minutes from the
Yes.
July 1st, both regular and executive meeting, in our packets. If there's any comment, I will take a motion for both of those.
Is your email?
I'm moving.
All right, Krista, do I have a second? Sorry. David, second, all in favor? Any abstentions due to lack of, thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah. Everyone, we still have some business to go, and apologies particularly for those online. I want to make sure that they can hear us, that the mic does pick up everything here. Next, we've got our consent agenda. I'd like to know, there's 2 items here. I'd like to speak on the senior community center grant application, if I may just briefly. For years, we've been talking about or getting updates on a senior and community center for Hopewell Borough, Pennington, and Hopewell Township. Going back to 2016, there have been grants from the county being held open for the 3 towns, $500,000 each towards senior services and recreational services. It's been held open for this project, and I'm happy to say that it is advancing. And Hopewell Township and the Hopewell YMCA secured some property behind the ShopRite, and it's called the Zeitz track, they used to call it that. Right now, Lennar is building some houses there, but behind on the Reed Road side is some property that the township is designing a community center for. We've talked about our kind of participation or our, I guess, joining their ask for the county to release the funds that have been designated for this. I believe I don't know if it was in the materials, but there is a match for these grants. However, Hopewell Township is taking care of the match. So for this, there is a $500,000 grant, what's called Mercer at Play, that we can allocate towards this project. There probably no other project, frankly, because the grants otherwise have expired or would expire from the county. And in this case, despite what the grant terms say, Hopewell Township, as part of the application, is taking care of the match. So it's really just us kind of directing the county to put funds towards the project. Doug, do you have something you can say on the HVIB, which I believe is the bistro project? You were, or Lisa, just 30 seconds on.
Yeah,
what that
they
means.
were approved for a variance for a change of use for their apartment mix at the last planning board meeting, and this agreement reflects that change. So it's increase from 4 to 6 apartments and the restaurant on the 3rd floor.
And so I guess this agreement is kind of the administrative thing that we do with most projects of this size. Thank you. Anyone have any questions? I would, or I'd certainly take a motion.
I'll motion. I'll second.
Krista second, Deb first. It's been like, feels like months since we've done a resolution, but this is a roll. I almost forgot how things work.
Ms. Lennius? Ms. Lennius?
Yes.
Ms. Weaver?
Yes.
Ms. Steeler?
Yes.
Ms. McCullough?
Yes.
Mr. Mackey?
Yeah.
Ms. Hope?
Yes.
Next, I'll take a motion for. Next, I'll take a motion to approve claims for payment. Oh, it's a race here. I heard Heidi first, sorry. Do we have a second? Beth? All right, thank you, Samara.
Ms. Hook? Can I ask you a question about this later, even if I say yes now? I mean, I'm not gonna deny it. I just had a question about that. If I can ask you later.
Okay, no, if you're comfortable later, it would be in order to ask a question now, if it's been moved inside.
Just, I was looking through, and I know it's sort of picky, but just there's two items that we paid to the township. One was animal control, and it was $6,000 for a month. What is happening? What was that? That's not wrong.
Well, so we have a shared services agreement with the county to be our health office. And I imagine this is a quarterly payment, or is that a monthly?
I believe it's quarterly.
Yeah, so that is
I believe it's
like
quarterly.
1/4 of what we pay the township to be our health office.
That's the.
Or animal control, I'm sorry. or-
The health service, it was very, yeah.
I might have, I also, it's a long way, I if you said health, I meant health, if you said animals, I said, they do that for both of those services.
Got it, so
provide,
that
and
wasn't
we
like
pay.
we had $6,000
Of tasks.
Yeah,
No.
yes, got it,
No, no,
okay.
no.
They run the whole.
They go through everything.
Okay, I was thinking, I don't know why we're not talking.
Andrew Weber was in town, or something.
All right, I just got it.
So we have a first and a second,
Ms. Hook? Yeah. Mr. Mackey?
yes.
Ms. McCollum? Yeah. Ms. Steeler?
Yes.
Ms. Weaver?
Yes.
Ms. Lynn?
Yeah,
Next, appointments, I'll just note, and I'll do it again at the end during my report, but, I want to thank our prosecutor, Chris Malek-Schmidt, for, his service here from the town. He's, moved on to other things, not better towns, but, maybe better things, than being here, but I wish him well and thank him for his service. Joe Torelli is an attorney that we actually been using. He used to be, at least at your firm, and has been handling, he was the attorney that was victorious in that Verizon litigation that we talked about earlier, and is handling another matter for the borough. He's the prosecutor in many other towns as well. So
that's great.
then Krista's been acting in this capacity for quite some time, and I don't think we haven't formalized it, so thank you for continuing.
So
to
is
be on.
that part of the PVSAC, or is that different? I'm just.
No, the pedestrian bike safety advisory is a Hopewell Borough advisory committee to council. This is the Mercer County.
Oh,
Vision Center.
Okay,
Yes, yes,
thank you.
yep. And then, Mercer County is anticipating, receiving some proceeds from the opioid settlement and has, set up a commission, and, I'm thankful to, resident for volunteering and some expertise in that area, so, I don't believe there's any action on this other than that, right? So, with that, get into our liaison reports. Mary, you wanna start tonight?
Sure. Open space did not, meet the last meeting, Board of Health met. Yesterday, we met with the new health officer, Gary Dorsey, for the township, we have a shared services agreement with them, so that's really great to know that that position's been filled. There's been a bit of turnover, in the health department, so they, a lot of, well, at least one of their positions was grant funded, and that grant funding has expired, so they're looking, to find a way to close that gap with their health outreach coordinator. So Gary has some great ideas on outreach, and offering more community and health education programs moving forward. The new social support services brochure is out. It can be found on the Department of Health website.
We have a link on each of our websites.
Yep, yes. Also rabies clinics are coming up. There will be one in the borough on November 16th at the train station from 9 AM till noon. Sorry, a couple other things. Flu shot clinics are also coming up. Starting in September, they run through the middle of October. And then lastly, this was sort of something that's always gone over my head. There is a very clear now sign up for an emergency alert program through the Office of Emergency Management. I know it's come up in a couple of meetings before where people have asked, oh, did you get the text after this flood? I'm like, I didn't know that I could do that. So it's on the Hopewell Police page, hopewellpoliceng.gov. There's a sign up, and I'll get this so that we can have it on our website too, but I think it's been a little bit unclear how to get signed up to get texts and alerts from the OEM and from the police department moving forward. So we'll make sure that everybody has access to that. And then the cats,
We joke, but this is still, this is still something that, the Board of Health and, Belinda, the Animal Control Officer, have been working nonstop. This is not a Hopewell Borough or even Hopewell Valley issue. This is, an issue across the state with, feral cat colonies. If you see a cat and its ear is clipped, that means that it's been spayed or neutered and released, and it's, referred to more as like a community cat. But we do have some issues within the borough that Belinda's been working really hard on, and that Gary and I have also spoke about, and we'll catch up with you as well. Of what we can do moving forward to make sure that all of the cats in the borough are taken care of and can be considered community cats as well. But most of the shelters right now are full. So when they do try to take the cats to shelters, there's not really a lot that can be done right now.
Sorry, just, for the Board of Health, do they, is their next meeting date set, do you know?
Sorry, yep, September 17th. Will be the Hopewell Valley Joint Board of Health meeting. I think it is at Pennington's Municipal Building. But I don't know if it's been confirmed yet.
All right, let's all make sure that gets up.
Yes, yeah, sorry.
Thank you. Deb, you wanna go next?
Sure, Recreation Committee has a concert coming up on August 10th, at the Gazebo Park. The band is Loose Bricks, so please bring your chair and try to attend. We continue to have quoits, horseshoes, and cornhole at the train station on Wednesday nights. The library board meeting is, this coming Tuesday on August 6th. They're currently working on updating the employee manual as well as a code of conduct and implementing term limits for board members. And then the building committee, met on July 29th to discuss the status of all the projects in town, and I think Doug will probably go over that list later today. That's it.
Thanks. Dave, you wanna go next?
So we got the results of our July PFAS testing, which are still below the New Jersey DEP access contaminant limits, so that's 9 consecutive quarters over 2 years. That's always good news. We'll be putting out an updated public notice required literally, I think that's due by September 1st, so that'll be coming out in August. We just submitted during July our updated lead service line inventory report to NJDEP, and also a lead service line progress report to the DEP, which is required every July. And then finally, a lead service line, an updated lead service line identification and replacement plan, which we just submitted to the DEP on the 31st. These are all regulatory requirements. At our water informational outreach session, obviously, on the 30th. And just preparation for that was a lot of number crunching and forecasting and fiscal analysis to support that. And just got our New Jersey American Water bill, which I'm in the process of going through. Like I said, they upped their lead service line replacement surcharge, but everything else is same rates so far. We're waiting to see what happens in September, which is if the BPO approves their rate increase, that's probably when we would see it hit. So we'll track it. Report, I forgot to say, and planning board didn't get this month, so.
Okay, thanks. I don't know.
Yeah, the EDC met, Carol Kehoe did specifically report that she saw an immediate uptick in new customers, thanks to the parking being made available again across the street. She had a very good weekend, and so just the EDC just wanted to say thank you to everyone who supported it, and it has helped and is appreciated by the merchant community. The planter project is going well. Lori Cleveland, who's doing most of the handwork of it, has noted that the single planter that she kind of test planted a full year ago and is now at her house, and she let it winter over, it's doing so much better than the plants in town. And so for that, because it had that winter, and so for that reason, we are planning to purchase new liners for the borough planters, so that rather than planting, we were originally gonna take those plants and plant them like out in the Sourlands. We can bring those same plants back, and the Sourlands will deal with overwintering, and so they will come out kind of more flush at the beginning of next season. And that will be an expense that we will be able to cover through the sponsorship of the planters, so we won't need to use any, borough funds or anything. And I will not be able to attend the next two meetings, so Sherry Cook has offered to step in as, for the next two meetings for the EDC, thank you. And the green team did not meet in July, but they are present at the Pennington Farmers Market on the last Saturday of each month. The next date for that is August 31st, and a detailed list of what they accept for recycling is available on the Green Team website, hopewellgreenteam.org, and we will meet again next month.
Thank you. Sure.
Emergency services, the fire department made 41 calls last month and EMU made 35. They always have some crazy success story about how they resuscitated someone, and it's really enlightening. And just a reminder, currently, all those calls are free to the unlucky/lucky recipient, so we appreciate their service. They are participating in the National Night Out, which is a free community event all over the country, and it will be Tuesday, August 6th at Stony Brook from 6 to 8, so free things for kids and adults. Seniors are having their next community connections here tomorrow at 10 a.m. It's a company called Synergy Home Care that talks about their range of home care options. They are having an orientation for their Grand Pals program, which is seniors reading to kindergarten students at various elementary schools. If you're interested in that, come and talk to me. It's the cutest. And ice cream social, August 23rd. At 1 p.m, which I'm planning on. All these things you can register for on the senior services page on our website. And Shade Tree, just a reminder, there are new forms for tree requests. If you have a branch you want looked at, or if you have a tree you need cut down, there's new forms, so please look online and fill those out. And we met this morning with a young man named Lyndon Horton, who is an Eagle Scout, and his project is to solicit funds for new trees and plant them around Hopewell Borough. And so there's hope for our future, because he was an amazing 17-year-old who isn't on screens all day. He's fishing and planting trees. So it was delightful to talk to him. And then on a personal note, I in addition to the mayor's office hours, which I would strongly recommend going to first, I also have a council coffee the first Tuesday of every month. It's usually at Chubby's, but next week we'll be at Borough because they're closed for a Wiltshire vacation. So you can come to talk to me first Tuesday of the month from 8 to 10. If I don't have answers, I will get them for you. So
Sure.
The Pedestrian Bike Safety Advisory Committee is still on hiatus. The Mercer County Vision Zero Task Force met this past Monday. We are still compiling traffic safety plans, hopes, dreams, et cetera, from local municipalities within the county, trying to compile them and see what everyone's, again, goals they'd like to achieve, and just collecting information before we actually produce some sort of document for Vision Zero. An interesting thing that just stuck out, this very, very informative meeting, was that 54% of all pedestrians struck within Mercer County it's a fatal crash, they die. It's a crazy number, and if you think about the crashes that we've had here in the borough, we've certainly had more than our fair share. So on a happier note, you guys kind of heard we're gonna get some money coming in to help fix this, or at least try to. So that is my other big news, and the mayor and I had a very productive meeting with the county DOT, and he's gonna tell you some information from that.
There you go. Yeah. Thank you. Couple things for me. I see some people who have been in my more recent office hours with us here. It's the second, every other Wednesday. It was yesterday, but it's usually the second Saturday. This month, though, it's going to be the 17th, which is the third Saturday. It's up on the website, but just a note, we have more people on Wednesdays than Saturdays, and that does not mean, and that's not because we stopped bringing donuts, because nobody, Doug would bring donuts, and honestly, nobody likes donuts, as it turns out. I'm surprised, but this month, it'll be the third Saturday, the 17th. Again, I thank Chris Malchman, our prosecutor. We'll thank him again, though. He's really they're a phenomenal part of our community, and it's neat to have people who are involved, professionally, that actually live in town as well. I was, so sorry to miss him as a neighbor too. Council President Weaver mentioned meeting with the county yesterday, and I want to thank them. They're not listening, but thank them for the collaborative relationship that we have with the engineering planning and the county administration. Everything from the advanced notice we received about the Carter Road Bridge work, which I mentioned in a second, happening, to working with us on our 25-mile-an-hour speed limit reduction this past year. We very much appreciate our collaboration with them giving us ideas, them working with us towards our goals, particularly as it involves their streets. They're quite a progressive group, and they're both listening to us, and by listening to us, they're really listening to ideas that we've gotten from our residents about safety. So excited to have them help us spend that $1.5 million on improvements to our streets. One thing that we're about to get up on the website, but they just let us know that East Broad Street is gonna finally be repaved starting the 12th of August. So it's not gonna necessarily, or Doug, tell me if it's gonna necessarily involve the full closure. I think they're just gonna mill and pave.
Yeah, they haven't given us a detour plan yet. But for the paving, it'll probably be a full budget for the paving.
All right, so
For how many, for like one block at a time or like here?
No, they'll probably just run, they'll
Oh,
probably do
the
it run.
all of East Broad. but
Yeah,
then
they'll do
this
East Broad to
Greenwood.
Greenwood,
Okay.
and then they're doing Llewellyn to Windsor.
but the Llewellyn to Windsor date is a
It's
future date.
September 11th.
Okay. Also pleased to say that up on our website, there's information about the Carter Road Bridge replacement just past St. Michael's on Princeton Avenue before it becomes Carter, or if it's become Carter at that time, I'm not even sure. There's a bridge that's gonna be replaced. Originally, it told us that there would be only a 3-day closure, first beginning while they set up a bypass road, and then at the end, when they're finished. They were happy to tell us that they're not gonna need to do that they'll be able to maintain at least one lane essentially throughout the entire replacement process. And for those of you who remember a couple years ago, the process of 518, where we were out of business for months. I just cannot thank them enough on working with us and both finding information well in advance and figuring out a way to do this without making it really hard to get into our town. So I want to thank them again for that. Sure.
Just when we're talking about repaving up to Windsor Way, we all know the infamous passing zone that is currently on that end of town. That is gonna be no longer a passing zone after the repaving, so that's another safety improvement that we're looking forward to.
At our,
Are those dates on the website somewhere?
not yet, we just got them.
Okay, we just- oh, okay, so
I'm just
you-
saying, we just got them, they're not.
Okay, so they.
There is a road closure detour page, Hopewell Borough -NJ.US/roads that's linked there, but just always go to that. It lists all of our construction projects and detours, and it's about to be updated with that particular information now that we've got it. I want to thank our clerk actually and Doug, but mostly but largely Reggie for it. I don't know if you noticed, those of you who pulled down this month's agenda, but a lot of new work went into a process there from our professionals to include the backup information for the things that we're talking about. So we're trying as we go forward to not just have the order or the agenda itself downloadable, but behind that, it would say, item 9 is resolutions, here's the resolution. So I'm really thankful for the work that went into both the idea for that and for doing it to get that out to everyone. All of our recent meetings, including Tuesdays, are now up on our borough YouTube. I was gonna say page, I guess YouTube is a channel. But available from the top, you can subscribe from the borough website or find it on YouTube. I want to thank our administrator, actually, I realized today, or during a meeting we had on Monday, the buildings committee met with a resident who's working, doing a phenomenal job helping us envision dark sky ordinance. And after that was done, we went through this list of things that the borough has done, the kind of things you don't really think or talk about. Finishing out road projects, getting fire hydrants fixed, and the list was extremely exhaustive. And it was heartening, and, you know, just for my behalf and hopefully from everyone here, we don't really see all of the work that gets done to some of these, not just day to day, but the list of projects that are not even day to day projects, but kind of major milestone things that we don't really think about, but that are complete now that we've gotten through in the last couple months. It was an impressive list, and I just wanted to take the time to point out how amazed I was with the accomplishments. Done. Particularly combined with all these other nuts and bolts things that you don't really, you know, think about, but
Exhaustive.
yeah, thank you. Yes. And finally, I just want to thank both everyone here tonight and everyone listening online or watching online, and everyone came out on Tuesday in particular. You know, we're all volunteers on this side, and you guys are as well. And you know, what we hope for in a community is the level of engagement that we're seeing now. We hopefully feel like we've done some things to help increase it, either changes to the meetings, helping different ways of getting information out, different ways to interact with us. We're learning things there as well. We've had some meetings where, you know, it's not been a problem in the past that we didn't fit everyone in a room. And when you invite everyone to a meeting on an important topic, we're finding the problem, frankly, that you know, maybe a little bit of space. So on Tuesday, we didn't need it, but we tried an overflow space that hopefully will work if we need it again in the future. But I just wanted to say on my behalf, and I think everyone up here and our professionals, just to thank everyone in our community again for just being so engaged, working with us, talking with us, coming to these meetings. You know, looking this way out of the meetings, we see a steady increase of people in the seats with you. I know it's a big deal to be here at 9:30 or 10 o'clock at night, but you could be doing something a lot more fun than this. And this is what we hope for, this is what we envision and work towards. And I just can't thank you all enough for being part of this. We may not agree on every issue, but we want to be talking about it with you guys here or in other forums that we've got. So with that, thank you all and everyone who tuned in or was here Tuesday or other. Doug, do you want to add?
Yeah, I'm just gonna hit a couple of things. The railroad station exterior renovations, we're still on track for mid-September, completion. We're holding bi-weekly progress meetings, and the New Jersey Historic Trust has been attending all those meetings. I think that's great. No update yet on the grant. We continue to do work on our water system. So what we've done is we had some NJDEP violations. We replaced the check valve for 2.9 at 2,900. We put a variable frequency drive on our new pump. It controls the pump electronically so that we're not just going 100% all the time.
Yeah, or the way it was before, where to control the pump, you're shutting a valve partway and the pump is pushing water up against that valve, not a good way to do it. So this way we're nicer to our motor.
Right, and it's more energy efficient, it saves the motor, saves all the other components, so we changed that out, that cost us $3,000. And then we also, we had to install a new meter. So that clears out 3 NJDEP violations, so those are all closed out. I'll just jump down to, we had some really storm basins that really needed some attention, so we got 4 of those completed. And we've made great progress on Hart Avenue. That's a big project for us, and Bob's done a great job with the engineering. We didn't have final engineering, he's pulled that all together, we got the quantities done. It's complicated, it's more complicated because we have 2 separate grants. So the DOT now makes us break out quantities per grant, so we had to split the project into twice, but that's getting ready to go out, and we'll be awarding that this year, hopefully in October, if everything goes well at our October meeting, and that's curbing and a lot of good stuff on that road. So I'm very excited that we were able to get that engineered and we'll get it out the door. Okay, and I'll leave it there.
Okay. With that, open up the meeting to the public for our second session. Here in person or raise your show yourself by pushing the raised hand button online via Zoom. I'm gonna note that I see none on Zoom and no one rushing to the front to speak here as well. So with that, and noting the decently late hour of 9:36, I'll ask for a motion to adjourn for the evening.
Motion.
Do I have a second? All right, all those in favor? Good night, everybody.